Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Curtis Arias believed in three things: hard work, family, and keeping your word. At 38, he'd built what he thought was a good life. He left from machine shop at 6 a.m. every morning, came home by 6 p.m., and spent his evenings with his three kids: Mason, 8, Riley, 6, and little Harper, 4. His wife, Celeste, worked as an executive assistant at Harper Industries downtown, pulling in decent money that supplemented his engineering salary nicely. They'd met 12 years ago at a charity run. Celeste had been volunteer coordinator, all smiles and energy, her auburn hair catching the morning sun. Curtis, never smooth with women, had tripped over his own feet trying to get her attention. She'd laughed, helped him up, and somehow that awkwardness had turned into coffee, then dinner, then a year later, a wedding in her parents' backyard in Sacramento. "You're my rock," she'd told him on their wedding night. "Everything before you is chaos. You make me feel safe." He believed her, built a life around that belief. The house they bought in Riverside had 4 bedrooms and a yard big enough for a swing set. Curtis had installed that swing set himself, every bolt and chain, making sure it was safe. That was his nature: measure twice, cut once, make sure the foundation was solid. He coached Mason's little league team. He never missed Riley's dance recitals. He read Harper bedtime stories every single night, doing all the funny voices that made her giggle. Curtis's younger brother, Renee, often joked that Curtis was disgustingly domestic. "You got the white picket fence dream, hermano," Renee had said last Thanksgiving, beer in hand. "Rest of us are still figuring out what we want to be when we grow up." "Someone's got to be the boring one," Curtis had replied, grinning. But Curtis wasn't boring. He was content. There was a difference. He'd grown up watching his father work 3 jobs to keep their family afloat after their mother passed. Curtis had learned early that love meant sacrifice, that showing up mattered more than grand gestures. So he showed up every day for 12 years. Celeste had seemed happy enough. She went out with her girlfriends on Fridays, girls' night, she called it. She took weekend trips, occasionally for work conferences. Curtis never questioned it. Trust was the bedrock of marriage, wasn't it? And he trusted her completely. Looking back later, Curtis would realize how many small signs he'd missed. The new lingerie that he never saw her wear at home. The way she'd started hitting the gym 5 times a week, coming home glowing. Her phone face down on every surface. The sudden interest in privacy. Password on her phone, separate credit card for personal expenses. But trust, Curtis learned, could make a man blind. It was a Tuesday in early June when his entire world shattered. Curtis had come home early. The shop's AC had died in a California heat wave, and the boss had sent everyone home before someone collapsed. He'd stopped for ice cream, thinking he'd surprise the kids with an after-school treat. When he walked in at 3:47 p.m., the house was quiet. Too quiet. Celeste's purse was on the counter. Her phone lay next to it, screen glowing with a new message. Curtis wasn't the snooping type. He really wasn't. But the phone was unlocked, the message right there on the screen, and his eyes caught it before his brain could tell him to look away. Got the results. All 3 kids aren't his. He is still paying their bills. Faced with tears of joy. The sender, Trav Kissmark. Curtis stood there, ice cream melting in the plastic bag dangling from his hand. His vision tunneled. The message sat there, casual as a weather report, casually destroying everything he'd built over 12 years. 8 years with Mason. 6 with Riley. 4 with Harper. All 3 kids aren't his. His hands moved on autopilot. He pulled out his own phone, photographed the screen from multiple angles, made sure the timestamp and contact name were visible. Then he carefully placed Celeste's phone back exactly where he'd found it, screen timing out to black, just as it had been. The ice cream hit the counter. Curtis heard his own breathing, too loud in the silent kitchen. Upstairs, water ran. The shower. Celeste was home, probably getting ready for one of her evening work events. Curtis's mind raced through 1,000 thoughts at once. Rage, betrayal, confusion, pain so sharp it felt physical. But underneath all of it, something else emerged, something cold and clear. Don't react. Not yet. Think. If he confronted her now, what would happen? She'd cry. She'd deny. She'd probably lawyer up. He'd lose everything in the chaos. The house, half his paycheck, and he'd still be legally on the hook for 3 kids that apparently weren't his. The shower shut off. Curtis grabbed the ice cream, shoved it in the freezer, and walked out the front door. He sat in his truck for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, forcing himself to breathe normally. All 3 kids aren't his. 8 years. 6 years. For years. Who was Trav? How long had this been going on? Were the kids all from him, or were there others? Curtis started the truck. He didn't know where he was driving, but he drove. His phone rang. Celeste. He let go to voicemail. Then a text. Where are you? Thought you were working late. He texted back. Boss cut us loose early. Grabbed a beer with the guys. Home in a few hours. Her response was immediate. Okay. Have fun, babe. Face blowing a kiss. That emoji. So casual. So normal. As if she hadn't just destroyed everything. Curtis drove for 2 hours, mind working through the shock, the pain crystallizing into something else. Something harder. By the time he got home at 8 p.m., Celeste was curled up on the couch watching reality TV. She smiled when he walked in, the same smile she'd given him for 12 years. Hey, honey, kids are asleep. Long day. Yeah, Curtis said. His voice sounded normal. Distant, but normal. Long day. She didn't notice anything wrong. She never even looked up from her phone as he walked past her, heading upstairs to check on 3 children who weren't his, but who he'd loved with everything he had for 8 years, 6 years, for years. Mason was sprawled across his bed, still in his Little League uniform. Riley had fallen asleep with her art supplies scattered around her. Harper clutched her stuffed elephant, thumb in her mouth. Curtis stood in each doorway, looking at them. He'd changed their diapers, walked them through nightmares, taught Mason to ride a bike, braided Riley's hair, made Harper laugh with silly faces. All 3 kids aren't his. The pain was unbearable, but Curtis didn't break. Not yet. Instead, he walked to his workshop in the garage, pulled out a notebook, and began to plan. He would give Celeste 6 months. 6 months to think she'd gotten away with it. 6 months for Curtis to gather every piece of evidence he needed. 6 months to build a perfect trap. And then, on Christmas morning, he would give her one final gift. Chapter 2. Building the case. Curtis became 2 people overnight. There was the Curtis who came home every evening, who kissed his wife's cheek, who helped Mason with homework, and pushed Harper on the swings. The Curtis who smiled and nodded when Celeste talked about her day at Harper Industries, who didn't flinch when she mentioned her boss Travis Harper in conversation, because of course Travis Harper. Trav. The name had been right there all along. And then there was the other Curtis, the one who lived in the pre-dawn hours and late nights, building a case like he built machines, methodically, precisely, missing nothing. The morning after the discovery, Curtis had called in sick to work. Not unusual, he'd banked hundreds of sick days over the years, never taking time off. He spent that day in his truck outside a strip mall office building, waiting for it to open. At 9 a.m. sharp, Curtis walked into the office of Simon Cameron, private investigator. Simon was in his 50s, former LAPD, with the weathered look of a man who'd seen every kind of human ugliness. His office smelled like coffee and old leather. "What can I do for you?" Simon asked, gesturing to a chair. Curtis placed his phone on the desk, showing the photograph of the text message. Simon studied it for a long moment. "Hell of a way to find out." "I need everything," Curtis said. His voice was steady. "How long it's been going on. Financial records. Where they meet. If there are others. Everything that will stand up in court." "Court gets messy with this stuff," Simon warned. "California's a no-fault state. Adultery doesn't matter much in divorce proceedings anymore." "I don't care about the divorce," Curtis said. "I care about not paying child support for 3 kids that aren't mine. And I care about making sure she gets nothing when this is over." Simon leaned back. "That's a different game. More expensive." "How expensive?" "Retainer of 10 grand. Could run you 30 by the time we're done." Curtis didn't hesitate. "When can you start?" "Today." Over the next week, Simon worked fast. He confirmed what Curtis had already suspected. Travis Harper, 41, was the CEO of Harper Industries, where Celeste had worked for 9 years. Married, 2 kids of his own, big house in Newport Beach. Net worth estimated at $40 million. They've been careful, Simon reported during their second meeting. Burner phones for communication, hotel rooms paid in cash. But people always make mistakes. The mistakes came in the form of credit card receipts Celeste thought she'd hidden, charges at hotels during work hours, security footage from the parking garage at Harper Industries showing them leaving together, a paper trail of gifts, jewelry, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to Napa that Celeste had claimed was a girl's trip. But the biggest breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Curtis had a friend from college, Evan Swanson, who'd gone into family law. Over beers one evening, Curtis nursing his slowly, playing the role of normal husband, he'd casually mentioned a hypothetical situation. Let's say a guy finds out his kids aren't his, Curtis said, keeping his voice neutral. How screwed is he? Evan grimaced. In California? Pretty screwed if he's on the birth certificates. Presumed father status is tough to break, especially after years of acting as the father. Courts prioritize the children's stability. What about DNA tests? Need those for sure. But even with proof, if you've been acting as the father for years, courts might still hold you financially responsible. It's complicated. So the guy's just stuck? Evan shook his head. Not necessarily. If he can prove fraud, that the mother deliberately deceived him about paternity, he might have a shot. Needs to show she knew and concealed it. That's where it gets tricky. Curtis filed that information away. Proof of fraud. That was the key. The DNA test came back in early July. Curtis had arranged them through Simon's contacts. Discreet, court-admissible, comparing Curtis's DNA to all 3 children using hair samples collected from their brushes. The results were clinical, impersonal, probability of paternity, 0% for all 3 children. Curtis stared at those numbers for a long time. Part of him had hoped, irrationally, that maybe one would be his. Maybe Mason, or Riley, or Lil Harper. But no, 0. Across the board. He was a stranger to them, genetically, and yet they were his entire world. That realization brought a new kind of pain, one Curtis had to compartmentalize quickly. He couldn't afford to break. Not yet. Simon's surveillance revealed the full scope of the affair. It had been going on for 9 years, starting just months after Curtis and Celeste's wedding. The timeline was damning. Mason born 9 months after the affair began. Riley 2 years later, during a period when Curtis had been working double shifts to save for a house down payment. Harper conceived during what Celeste had called a work retreat in San Diego. Travis Harper was the father of all 3. DNA tests confirmed it. Simon had managed to obtain a sample from a coffee cup Travis had discarded at a Starbucks. But there was more. Simon uncovered evidence that Celeste had been siphoning money from their joint account for years, small amounts Curtis had never noticed. She'd built a secret savings account, $38,000 over 9 years. She's got an exit strategy, Simon said during their July meeting. People don't build secret accounts for fun, my guess. She was planning to leave you once the youngest hit school age. Probably figured she could lock down Harper first. Curtis absorbed this information without visible reaction. Inside, the rage was building, but he kept it controlled. Contained. What about Harper's wife? Kate Harper doesn't seem to know anything about the affair. Or if she does, she's ignoring it. Rich women sometimes do that, pretend not to see what they don't want to acknowledge. Give me everything on their marriage. Financial records, prenup details if they have one. I want to know exactly how much Travis Harper has to lose. Simon raised an eyebrow. You planning on telling the wife? Maybe, when the time is right. Throughout July and August, Curtis played the perfect husband. He took Celeste and the kids to Disneyland for their summer vacation. He held Celeste's hand on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride while she smiled for the camera, and he thought about how she'd been lying to him for 9 years straight. He coached Mason's baseball team to a regional championship. Mason ran to hug him after the final out, shouting, "Dad, Dad, we did it!" And Curtis hugged him back, thinking about how that word, Dad, was built on a lie. He attended Riley's dance recital, where she performed a solo in a pink tutu, and afterward she asked, "Did I do good, Daddy?" and he told her she was perfect, even as his heart broke into smaller and smaller pieces. He read Harper bedtime stories every single night, doing the voices she loved, and she would fall asleep with her small hand in his, trusting and innocent. The children hadn't done anything wrong. Curtis knew that, but every time he looked at them, he saw Celeste's betrayal. He saw 9 years of lies. He saw a life that had never been real. It was eating him alive. In September, Curtis started going to the gym at 5 a.m. before work. Not to get in shape, to have a place where he could punch the heavy bag until his knuckles bled and no one would ask questions. The physical pain helped, gave him somewhere to put the rage. Renee noticed the changes. Over Sunday dinner at Curtis's house, Celeste cooking, playing the perfect hostess, his brother pulled him aside. "You good, Hermano?" "Yeah." "What?" "You seem, I don't know, different, distant." Curtis forced a smile. "Just work stress. Big project coming up." Renee didn't look convinced, but he dropped it. By October, Simon had compiled a file 3 inches thick. Financial records, surveillance photos, hotel receipts, text message logs recovered from phone company records, DNA tests, witness statements. Everything Curtis needed to prove fraud, adultery, and deception. "This is enough to bury her in court," Simon said. "Question is, what exactly do you want to accomplish?" Curtis had been thinking about that question for months. He could divorce Celeste quietly, use the evidence to avoid child support, and move on. That was the safe play. But safe had never been Curtis's style. He'd been safe for 12 years, and look where it got him. "I want her to lose everything," Curtis said. "The house, the money, her reputation, her job. I want Travis Harper to face consequences. And I want it to happen in the most public, devastating way possible." "That's ambitious. Can it be done?" Simon smiled slowly. "Oh yeah, but you'll need to be patient, and you'll need to be willing to go all the way. No backing out halfway through." "I'm not backing out." "Good. Then let's talk strategy." They planned late into the night, Curtis and Simon, building a trap that would spring shut with perfect precision. They brought in Evan Swanson for the legal angles, and, slowly, the plan took shape. The final piece fell into place in November. Curtis had been thinking about the timing. He needed a moment that would maximize impact, that would be impossible for Celeste to recover from. A moment where her betrayal would be witnessed by everyone who mattered. Christmas morning. It was perfect. The kids would be there, old enough to remember what happened, but young enough that Curtis could document their last holiday together as a family. Celeste's parents would be visiting from Sacramento, as they did every year. Celeste would be relaxed, happy, thinking she'd gotten away with everything. And Curtis would give her one final gift. The gift of consequences. Chapter 3. The Gift. Curtis bought Celeste's Christmas present in early December. He stood in the jewelry store, looking at diamond necklaces, and selected one that cost $4,000, more than he'd ever spent on a gift before. The jeweler gift wrapped it beautifully, all silver paper and white ribbon. Inside the box, Curtis added a USB drive and a handwritten note. The weeks leading up to Christmas were surreal. Celeste was in high spirits, planning the holiday dinner, buying presents for the kids. She seemed happier than she'd been in months, humming Christmas carols while decorating the tree. Curtis wondered if she was happy because the affair was going well, or if she was planning something herself. Maybe she was working up the courage to leave him. The thought should have bothered him more, but by December, Curtis felt nothing but cold calculation. On Christmas Eve, Celeste's parents arrived, John and Miriam Boyd, decent people who thought their daughter had married well. Curtis had always gotten along with them. John liked to talk about vintage cars, a passion Curtis shared. Miriam doted on the grandkids. "You've built a beautiful family, Curtis," Miriam said that evening, watching the kids play with their cousins in the living room. "Celeste is lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Curtis replied smoothly. The lies came easier now. He'd been learning from the master. That night, after everyone was asleep, Curtis sat in his workshop and held the gift box in his hands. Inside was evidence of 9 years of betrayal, compiled and organized into an irrefutable narrative. Photos, timeline, DNA results, financial records, everything. On the USB drive was a video Curtis had recorded himself, explaining everything calmly and methodically to whomever watched it. In the note, he'd written instructions. Watch the video first. Then look through the files. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Curtis. He'd made copies of everything, of course. Simon had the originals locked in a safe. Evan had duplicates for the legal proceedings. But this box, this moment, this was for Celeste. Christmas morning arrived with California sunshine and the excited screams of children. Mason, Riley, and Harper thundered down the stairs at 6 a.m., and Curtis helped them open presents, keeping his camera phone out, recording everything. The kids tore through wrapping paper. Mason got the bike he'd been asking for. Riley got an art set. Harper got a play kitchen. They were happy, innocent, unaware. Celeste's parents emerged around 7 a.m., and Celeste started cooking breakfast. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and coffee. Everything was perfect. Norman Rockwell perfect. At 9 a.m., after breakfast, after the kids had settled down with their new toys, Curtis stood up. I got Celeste something special this year, he announced. Saved up for months. Celeste's eyes lit up. Curtis, you didn't have to. I wanted to. He handed her the silver box. She opened it slowly, dramatically, playing to her parents watching with indulgent smiles. The jewelry box inside drew a gasp. Curtis, this is gorgeous. She pulled out the diamond necklace, holding it up to the light. There's more in the box, Curtis said quietly. Celeste looked confused, then reached in and pulled out the USB drive and the note. Her face went pale. What is this? Why don't you read the note? Curtis suggested. The room went very quiet. John and Miriam sensed something was wrong. Celeste's hands shook as she unfolded the paper. Curtis watched her eyes move across the words. Watched the color drain from her face completely. Watch her mouth open, then close, then open again. Curtis. Her voice was barely a whisper. I found a text message in June, Curtis said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. From Travis. The one about the DNA tests. The one where you laughed about me paying for kids that aren't mine. Miriam gasped. John stood up. What the hell is going on? Curtis turned to them. Your daughter has been having an affair for 9 years with her boss, Travis Harper. All 3 of my children, Mason, Riley, and Harper, are his. I have DNA tests proving it. Everything's on that USB drive. You're insane, Celeste said, but her voice cracked. This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown. I took screenshots of the messages, Curtis continued. Had a private investigator track your movements for 6 months. Got court-admissible DNA tests. I know about the hotels, the secret bank account, the gifts. I know everything, Celeste. And now everyone else is going to know, too. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. I just sent that same file to everyone on your contact list. Your friends, your coworkers, Travis's wife, Travis himself. By tomorrow, it'll be all over social media. By next week, it'll be the most interesting gossip in your office. Celeste lunged at him, screaming. John held her back. The kids started crying upstairs, frightened by the shouting. Curtis remained perfectly still. I filed for divorce yesterday. The papers will be served tomorrow. Given the fraud you committed, my lawyer is confident I won't owe you a cent. In fact, you'll probably owe me for the years of child support you essentially stole through deception. You can't do this, Celeste sobbed. You can't just the kids. The kids, Curtis repeated. Your kids with Travis. I loved them for 8 years, 6 years for years. I was their father in every way that mattered except biology. But you took that from me. You took everything from me. So now I'm taking everything from you. He picked up a duffel bag he'd hidden by the door. I'm leaving. The house is in my name. My credit bought it. My money pays the mortgage. You have 30 days to move out. After that, the locks change and your stuff goes to storage. Curtis, please. Miriam tried to intervene. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Curtis said to her, genuinely. You and John didn't deserve this. But your daughter made her choices. Now she lives with them. He walked toward the door. Curtis, Celeste screamed. You can't leave. The kids need you. I need you. Curtis stopped at the threshold. For just a moment, his mask cracked, and something raw and painful showed through. You should have thought about that 9 years ago. He walked out, got in his truck, and drove away. His phone started ringing immediately. Call after call after call. 67 missed calls by noon, mostly from Celeste, some from her parents, several from numbers he didn't recognize. Curtis ignored them all. He drove to a hotel Simon had recommended, checked in under a fake name, and finally let himself break. He sat on the edge of the bed and cried for the first time in 6 months. Cried for the life he'd lost, for the children who weren't his but who he'd loved anyway, for 12 years of lies and betrayal. But underneath the grief, there was satisfaction. He'd given Celeste exactly what she deserved: exposure, humiliation, and consequences. And he wasn't done yet. Chapter 4, Fallout. The first 48 hours after Curtis's departure were chaos. From his hotel room, Curtis monitored the situation through Simon's reports and social media. The file he'd sent had spread like wildfire. Celeste's friends were calling her a liar and a fraud. Screenshots of Travis Harper's messages circulated online. Someone had created a Reddit thread titled, "Local CEO Fathers 3 Kids with Employee While Both Married," that went viral in the local community groups. Travis Harper's wife, Kate, filed for divorce within 24 hours. According to Simon's sources, she'd walked into Travis's home office on Christmas evening, thrown a laptop at his head, and told him to get out. Kate Harper was from old California money. Her family owned commercial real estate across Los Angeles County. Travis had signed a prenup. His affair with an employee violated the morality clause. He's about to lose half of everything, Evan reported when he called Curtis on December 27th. Maybe more, depending on how vindictive his wife wants to be. And given that she's already hired Angela Preston as her lawyer, I'd say very vindictive. Angela Preston was legendary in California divorce circles, known for absolutely destroying wealthy husbands in court. What about the company? Curtis asked. Harper Industries board called an emergency meeting. Having your CEO's affair with a subordinate go public is a PR nightmare. There's talk of forcing him out. Curtis felt the first genuine smile in months cross his face. Good, but the satisfaction was short-lived. Because while Celeste and Travis were facing consequences, Curtis was facing his own crisis. The kids. On December 28th, Celeste's lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Jeffrey O'Connell, contacted Evan with a proposal. Celeste would agree to a quiet divorce if Curtis continued to support the children financially. Absolutely not, Curtis said when Evan relayed the offer. I understand the anger, Evan said carefully. But Curtis, you need to think about this practically. Those kids didn't ask to be born into this mess. They've known you as their father for their entire lives. And whose fault is that? Celeste's. Absolutely Celeste's. But punishing her means punishing them. Curtis hung up. He knew Evan was right on some level, but the thought of paying for Travis Harper's children while Harper himself presumably contributed nothing made Curtis's blood boil. The calls from Celeste continued. She left voicemails, crying, begging, threatening. Curtis listened to them once, then deleted them. But on January 3rd, a different call came through. A number Curtis didn't recognize. He answered. What? Mr. Arias? A young voice. Mason. Curtis's heart stopped. Mason? How did you get this number? Mom's phone. Are you coming home? The question hit like a physical blow. Curtis closed his eyes. Mason, it's complicated. Riley keeps crying. Harper doesn't understand what's happening. She keeps asking for you. Let me talk to your mom. She's in her room. She won't come out. Grandma and Grandpa are still here, but they're fighting with Mom all the time. Everything's scary. Curtis gripped the phone. This was exactly what he'd wanted. Celeste's life falling apart, consequences catching up to her. But hearing Mason's voice, hearing the fear and confusion. Mason, listen to me. What happened between your mom and me? It's between adults. It's not about you kids. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why did you leave? How could Curtis explain this to an 8-year-old? How could he say your mom lied to me for 9 years, and you're not actually my son? He couldn't. Not yet. I'm dealing with some adult stuff, Curtis said finally. But I promise you we'll talk soon. Is your grandma there? Yeah. Put her on. Miriam Boyd came on the line, her voice tight with anger and grief. Curtis, this is cruel. Whatever Celeste did, those children are innocent. I know that. Then come home. Please. They need you. What they need, Curtis said, voice hard, is for their biological father to step up. Maybe you should give Travis Harper a call. He hung up before she could respond. That night, Curtis couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Harper's face, the way she'd looked at him with complete trust when he read her bedtime stories. He kept hearing Mason's question, "Why did you leave?" The truth was, Curtis hadn't planned beyond the initial explosion. He'd wanted Celeste to suffer, wanted the world to know what she'd done, wanted consequences. But he hadn't thought through what came after. The next morning, Renee showed up at Curtis's hotel. "How did you find me?" Curtis asked. "Simon told me." "Relax." Renee pushed past him into the room. "Hermano, what the hell are you doing?" "You know what she did?" "Yeah, I know. Whole city knows. Celeste and her boss, 9 years, 3 kids. It's messed up. But Curtis, you're falling apart here." Curtis laughed bitterly. "I'm falling apart? I'm the one who planned this perfectly. I'm the one who got out clean." "You got out angry," Renee corrected. "Not the same as clean. And those kids? They're collateral damage in your war with Celeste. They're not my kids. Biologically, no. But you've been their father for years. DNA doesn't change that." Curtis sank onto the bed. "I don't know how to do this, Renee. I don't know how to look at them and not see her betrayal. Every single day, for 8 years, 6 years, for years, I loved those kids thinking they were mine. And it was all a lie. Was it?" Renee sat down next to him. "Were you lying when you taught Mason to throw a curveball? When you braided Riley's hair? When you read to Harper?" "That's not the point. That's exactly the point. Celeste lied. Celeste betrayed you. But what you felt for those kids, that was real. Only real thing in this whole mess." Curtis put his head in his hands. "I can't go back, Renee. I can't pretend everything's fine. Not asking you to. But maybe you can find a middle path. Some way to be there for them without letting Celeste off the hook." "Ow!" Renee shrugged. "No idea, man. But you'll figure out. You always do." After Renee left, Curtis sat in the quiet hotel room and thought. He thought about Mason's voice on the phone, about Harper asking for him, about Riley crying. And he thought about Travis Harper, rich, powerful Travis Harper, who'd fathered 3 children and was apparently content to let them become casualties of his affair. An idea began to form. Chapter 5, the second play. Curtis scheduled a meeting with Travis Harper for January 10th. It took some maneuvering. Travis wasn't returning calls, wasn't showing up at Harper Industries, was holed up in a rental property in Laguna Beach while his wife's lawyer circled. But Simon had connections, and one of them knew where Travis was hiding. Curtis showed up at the beach house unannounced. Travis answered the door looking haggard, unshaven, rumpled shirt, eyes red-rimmed. The powerful CEO was gone. This was just a man whose life had imploded. "What do you want?" Travis asked. "To talk. I've got nothing to say to you." Curtis smiled coldly. "Then listen." He pushed past Travis into the house. Expensive furniture, ocean views, the kind of place that screamed money. Curtis felt a fresh wave of anger. This man had everything, and it still wasn't enough. He had to take Curtis's life too. "You have 3 children," Curtis said, turning to face Travis. "Mason, Riley, and Harper. 8, 6, and 4 years old. Your children. Celeste told me you were leaving them." Travis said defensively. "I'm not their father. You are. Biologically, legally, morally. And right now, they're scared and confused and asking for me because you're a coward who won't step up." Travis's face flushed. "This situation is complicated." "It's really not. You slept with a married woman for 9 years. She got pregnant 3 times. Those pregnancies produced 3 children. Those children need a father. That's you. I have my own kids with Kate. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I can't just." Curtis moved fast. He grabbed Travis by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. Travis yelped. "Listen very carefully," Curtis said, voice low and dangerous. "I spent 8 years being a father to kids that weren't mine. I love them. I showed up for them every single day. And you're their actual father, and you're hiding in a beach house feeling sorry for yourself. Get off me." Curtis released him, stepped back. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to acknowledge paternity of all 3 children. You're going to set up trust funds for each of them, college, future expenses, everything. You're going to establish a visitation schedule and stick to it. And you're going to do it publicly, so everyone knows you're taking responsibility." Travis straightened his shirt, trying to regain composure. And if I don't, then I go to the media with everything. Your affair, the timeline, the DNA evidence. Right now, you're just a cheating husband. I can make you the deadbeat dad who abandoned 3 kids. Your reputation's damaged. I can make it destroyed. You already destroyed it. Not even close. You've still got money, connections, the potential to rebuild. But if you abandon those kids, you become the villain in every story about this situation. No coming back from that. Travis slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, why do you care? You said yourself they're not your kids. Curtis felt something crack inside his chest. Because somebody has to care about them. And it sure as hell isn't their mother. There was a long silence. Finally, Travis looked up. What do you want me to do? Over the next hour, Curtis laid out exactly what would happen. Travis would hire a lawyer, not to fight paternity, but to establish it legally. He would set up substantial trust funds. He would commit to regular visitation. He would issue a public statement taking responsibility. Celeste won't like this, Travis said. Celeste doesn't get a vote. She lied to both of us. She made this mess. Now we clean it up. What about you? Where do you fit in all this? Curtis had been thinking about that question for days. I don't know yet, but those kids deserve better than what they're getting. If that means I have to force their biological father to step up, fine. If it means I maintain some kind of relationship with them, fine. But I'm not walking away and pretending they don't exist. As Curtis turned to leave, Travis called after him. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About everything. Curtis stopped at the door. You should be sorry to Mason, Riley, and Harper. Not to me. I'm not the one who needs your apology. By January 15th, the deal was done. Travis's lawyer filed paternity acknowledgments for all 3 children. The trust funds were established, $200,000 each, untouchable until college. A visitation schedule was drafted, starting with supervised visits and gradually increasing. The public statement Travis released was carefully worded but clear. He acknowledged fathering 3 children during an extramarital affair and committed to supporting them financially and emotionally going forward. The news created another explosion in local social circles. Some people praised Travis for stepping up. Others criticized him for waiting until he was forced. Celeste, according to Evan's reports, was furious. She'd apparently hoped to use the children as leverage to extract money from Curtis. She's fighting the divorce terms, Evan told Curtis during a January 20th meeting, arguing that she deserves spousal support because she sacrificed her career to raise the children. Curtis laughed, a harsh sound. She worked full-time. I have the income records. I know. I told her lawyer that. But she's desperate. The secret bank account you found? Turns out she was planning to leave you and convinced Travis to leave his wife. She wanted to be the second Mrs. Harper. And instead, she's going to be the broke single mother whose affair destroyed 2 marriages. About that, Evans said carefully, the kids. Travis is following through on his commitments, which helps our case. But Curtis, you need to decide what role you want in their lives. Because right now, you're in limbo. Curtis knew Evan was right. He'd been avoiding making that decision, avoiding thinking about what came next. But he couldn't avoid it forever. That evening, he called Miriam Boyd. I want to see the kids, Curtis said. Not at the house. Somewhere neutral. Can you arrange it? Miriam was quiet for a moment. They miss you, Curtis. But they're also confused and hurt. Mason knows something's wrong, even if he doesn't understand what. Riley's been acting out at school. Harper cries at night. Curtis closed his eyes. I know. That's why I need to see them. To explain as much as I can. And Celeste, not there. This is about the kids, not her. 2 days later, Curtis met Mason, Riley, and Harper at a park in Riverside. Miriam brought them, then stayed in her car at a distance. The moment Harper saw Curtis, she ran. Daddy! Daddy! Curtis caught her, lifted her up, felt her small arms around his neck. Riley hung back, uncertain. Mason stood with his hands in his pockets, trying to look tough but failing. Hey guys, Curtis said, his voice thick. They sat at a picnic table. Curtis had rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but now that the moment was here, he didn't know how to begin. Why did you leave? Mason asked again. Curtis took a breath. Your mom and I, we have some problems that adults need to work out. It's not about you 3. but I needed some space to figure things out. Are you coming home? Harper asked, still clinging to his arm. No, sweetie, I'm not coming home. Your mom and I are getting divorced. Riley started crying. Mason's jaw tightened. Harper looked confused. She was too young to fully understand divorce. But listen, Curtis continued. Just because I'm not living at home doesn't mean I don't care about you. I'll always care about you. Always. Then why does it feel like you left us? Mason asked, and his voice broke. Curtis felt tears burning in his eyes. How could he explain this? How could he make an 8-year-old understand that love and biology weren't the same thing? That Curtis needed to protect himself even as he tried to protect them? Sometimes, Curtis said slowly, grown-ups make really bad choices that hurt the people around them. Your mom made some choices that hurt me badly, and I had to leave to take care of myself. But that doesn't change how I feel about you three. He was skirting the truth, buying time, but he couldn't tell them the full story. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They were too young, and the truth would devastate them. They spent an hour together. Curtis pushed Harper on the swings. He threw a baseball with Mason. He let Riley show him her latest drawings. It felt both familiar and strange, like visiting a life he used to have. When Miriam came to collect them, Harper cried and clung to Curtis. Riley hugged him tight. Mason shook his hand, trying to be grown up about it. Can we see you again? Mason asked. Curtis nodded. Yeah, we'll figure something out. After they left, Curtis sat alone at the picnic table for a long time. The winter sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. He'd told himself he was doing this to help the kids, to make sure Travis stepped up, to give them some stability. But the truth was messy, eh? Curtis still loved them, despite everything. Biology didn't erase 8 years, 6 years for years. Those memories were real, even if the foundation they were built on was rotten. He just didn't know how to reconcile that love with his need for justice, with his anger at Celeste, with the betrayal that still burned in his chest. But as he drove away from the park, Curtis knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 6, The Reckoning. February brought new developments. Travis Harper was forced out of Harper Industries. The board offered him a buyout, substantial, but far less than his shares were worth. According to Simon's sources, Travis took it rather than face a messy legal battle. He was bleeding money between the divorce settlement with Kate, the trust funds for Curtis's children, and now the company buyout at a discount. He's still rich, Simon reported, but not 40 million rich anymore. More like 5 million rich and dropping. Curtis felt a grim satisfaction. It wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough, but it was something. Celeste, meanwhile, was in free fall. Her job at Harper Industries ended when Travis left. Apparently, the new CEO had no interest in keeping the former CEO's mistress on staff. Her secret bank account was frozen as part of the divorce proceedings. She'd moved back in with her parents in Sacramento, taking the 3 kids with her. The house in Riverside, Curtis's house, stood empty, a monument to a life that no longer existed. Evan pushed for resolution. We can close this out now, he said during a late February meeting. Celeste's lawyer knows she has no leverage. She's ready to sign the divorce papers with minimal fuss. No spousal support, no child support from you since paternity has been established elsewhere. Clean split of assets heavily in your favor. What about the house? Yours. She has no legal claim. You bought it before the marriage, and the mortgage is in your name only. You could sell it, keep it, whatever you want. Curtis thought about that house. The swing set in the backyard. The growth marks on the doorframe, tracking how tall the kids were getting. The memories embedded in every wall. Sell it, Curtis said. I can't live there anymore. The divorce was finalized on March 1st. Curtis didn't attend the hearing. Evan handled everything. It was anticlimactic, after all the drama and pain, to have it end with signatures on paperwork. But that evening, as Curtis sat in his hotel room, he still hadn't found a permanent place to live. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Curtis Arias? A woman's voice, vaguely familiar. Who is this? Kate Harper, Travis's wife. Ex-wife now, I suppose. Curtis sat up straight. Mrs. Harper, what can I do for you? Kate's laugh was bitter. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? for exposing my husband, for forcing him to acknowledge his children, for making sure the truth came out. She paused. I knew, not the details, but I knew Travis was having an affair. I ignored it because it was easier than facing the truth. So in a way, I'm as complicit as he is. Curtis didn't know what to say. But you, Kate continued, you didn't ignore it. You burned everything down to make sure there were consequences. Part of me hates you for it. My life is upended. My children's lives are upended. But part of me respects the hell out of you. I'm not sure I deserve respect, Curtis said quietly. Maybe not, but you deserve closure. And I'm calling because I think you need to know something about Celeste. Curtis's hands tightened on the phone. What about her? She's not done trying to manipulate this situation. According to my lawyer, who talks to Celeste's lawyer, she's planning to file for emergency custody modifications. She's going to argue that Travis is unfit, that the divorce trauma is damaging the children, and that you should be forced to pay child support despite the paternity results. She can't do that. The DNA tests. California law is complicated. If you've been acting as the father for their entire lives, a judge might rule that you have ongoing financial obligations regardless of biology. It's called presumed father status. She's banking on a sympathetic judge. Curtis felt rage ignite. After everything, she's still trying to bleed me dry? Celeste is desperate. She's broke, unemployed, living with her parents. She needs money, and you're her best bet. I'll fight her. Good. But Curtis, you should know, she's also planning to use the children as weapons. She'll argue that your sudden abandonment caused them emotional damage, that you led them on by attending that park visit, then disappeared again. Curtis realized with sickening clarity that Celeste had been playing chess while he'd thought the game was over. What do I do? Whatever your lawyer tells you. But also, maybe consider what you actually want here. Do you want the kids in your life or not? Because right now you're caught between two positions. You're not their father, but you're also not willing to completely walk away. That ambiguity gives Celeste room to maneuver. After Kate hung up, Curtis called Evan immediately. She's right. Evan confirmed. I've been reviewing the case law, and Curtis, there's a real risk here. You established a parental relationship with those children. A judge might rule that it's in the children's best interest for you to maintain that relationship financially. That's insane. It's the law. California prioritizes the children's welfare over parental rights. If a judge decides that cutting you out entirely harms the kids, you could be on the hook for support. Curtis wanted to throw something. So what are my options? Option 1. Fight in court. Argue that Celeste's fraud absolves you of responsibility. It's legally sound, but could take months and cost tens of thousands in legal fees. And you might still lose. Option 2. Negotiate. Set terms you can live with. Maybe some financial support in exchange for visitation rights, and an agreement that prevents Celeste from ever increasing the amount. You want me to pay the woman who lied to me for 9 years. I want you to protect yourself legally while finding some peace. Curtis, you're not sleeping. You're drinking too much. You're stuck in this limbo. At some point, you need to move forward. Curtis hung up and sat in the dark hotel room. He thought about Christmas morning, the look on Celeste's face when her world imploded. He thought about the past 2 months, watching her life fall apart piece by piece. It had felt righteous at the time. Justified. She'd lied. She'd betrayed him. She'd stolen 9 years of his life. She deserved consequences. But now, as Curtis sat alone in a hotel room with no permanent address, no family, no clear path forward, he wondered who was really suffering most from those consequences. The answer wasn't as simple as he thought it would be. Chapter 7. The Trap Springs. Celeste filed her custody modification paperwork on March 15th. Evan received the documents and immediately called Curtis. She's going big, asking for temporary emergency custody order that requires you to resume child support payments while the paternity issue is litigated. She's arguing the children are in crisis and need immediate financial stabilization. Can she win? Depends on the judge. But Curtis, there's something else in these filings you need to see. Evan sent over the documents. Curtis read through them, his anger growing with each page. Celeste had painted a picture of Curtis as a manipulative, vindictive man who'd cruelly abandoned 3 children. She'd included statements from the kids, carefully edited, Curtis was sure, describing how much they missed Daddy and how confused they were by his absence. But the part that made Curtis see red was the financial affidavit. Celeste claimed to have no assets, no income, and no support. She'd somehow made $38,000 in her secret account disappear from the filing. She's committing fraud, Curtis said. That money exists. Simon found it. I know, but proving it in court means revealing how you found it, which could make you look like you were invading her privacy. I had a PI investigate my own wife. That's not illegal. No, but complicates things. Curtis, I think it's time we went on offense. Over the next week, Curtis and Evan crafted their counterattack. They would file a motion to dismiss Celeste's custody claim, backed by the DNA evidence and proof of her fraud. But more than that, they would file for fraud damages, arguing that Celeste's 9-year deception entitled Curtis to compensation for the money he'd spent supporting children he believed were his. This is aggressive, Evan warned. It'll get ugly. It's been ugly since June, Curtis replied. Let's finish this. The hearing was set for April 12th. But before the hearing, Simon came to Curtis with new information. Remember that secret account? Simon said. The $38,000? I kept digging. Turns out Celeste didn't just hide it. She moved it, transferred it to an account under her mother's name 2 weeks before filing the custody modification. Curtis felt a cold smile spread across his face. She's still playing games. Yeah, but now we have proof. Bank records, transfer documentation, everything. She committed perjury on her financial affidavit. Can we use this? Oh, we can definitely use this. The night before the hearing, Curtis couldn't sleep. He kept playing through scenarios, trying to predict how Celeste would react when confronted with the evidence. Would she fold? Fight? Try to manipulate the judge? He also thought about the kids. Mason would be 9 in a few months. Riley would start 2nd grade. Harper was growing up without him. That hurt worse than anything Celeste had done. April 12th arrived cold and gray. Curtis wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to his wedding, though he tried not to think about that. He met Evan outside the courthouse at 8:30 a.m. Ready? Evan asked. No, but let's do this anyway. Inside, the courtroom was exactly as Curtis had imagined. All wood paneling and American flags, presided over by Judge Ernest Bell, a stern-looking man in his 60s who had a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Celeste sat at the plaintiff's table with Jeffrey O'Connell. She looked diminished somehow, wearing a conservative dress that Curtis suspected was borrowed from her mother. When she saw Curtis, her face hardened. They didn't speak. Judge Bell called the hearing to order. We're here regarding the petition for emergency custody modification filed by Celeste Arias. Mr. O'Connell, you may proceed. O'Connell stood and launched into his argument. The children were suffering. They missed Curtis. The sudden loss of financial support was creating instability. Curtis had legal and moral obligations that he was shirking. It was a compelling narrative, Curtis had to admit. O'Connell even called Mason to testify. Mason looked terrified on the witness stand. He was wearing a button-up shirt that was too big for him, and he kept fidgeting with the collar. Mason, do you miss Curtis? O'Connell asked gently. Yes. Do you want him to be part of your life? Yes. Has his absence been difficult for you? Mason nodded, tears forming. I don't understand why he left. Riley cries all the time. Harper keeps asking when Daddy's coming home. Everything's confusing. Curtis felt his heart break. He wanted to stand up, to cross the courtroom, to tell Mason that everything would be okay. But he stayed seated, hands clenched in his lap. When O'Connell finished, Evan stood for cross-examination. Mason, do you know why Curtis left? Evan asked. Mason shook his head. Your mother hasn't explained it to you? She said Curtis was being mean, that he didn't want us anymore. Did Curtis ever tell you he didn't want you? No. He said he'd always care about us. At the park in January, when you saw Curtis, did he seem like he didn't want you? Mason thought about it. No. He seemed sad, but he seemed like he wanted to be there. Evan nodded. Thank you, Mason. The boy was excused. Celeste shot Evan a venomous look. Then it was the defense's turn. Evan called Curtis to the stand. Curtis told his story simply and factually. He described finding the text message, the investigation, the DNA results, the 9 years of lies. He explained that he'd been paying for and raising 3 children who weren't his, believing them to be his own, while Celeste and Travis Harper carried on their affair. Judge Bell listened intently, occasionally taking notes. Then Evan introduced the financial evidence. Your Honor, the plaintiff has represented that she has no assets and requires emergency support. However, we have evidence that Ms. Arias maintains a secret bank account containing $38,000, which she recently transferred to her mother's name to hide from these proceedings. O'Connell shot to his feet. Objection. This is a baseless accusation. I have the bank records right here, Evans said smoothly, handing copies to the judge and to O'Connell. The courtroom went very quiet. Judge Bell reviewed the documents. His expression darkened. Ms. Arias, did you transfer $38,000 to an account under your mother's name on February 28th of this year? Celeste looked at O'Connell, who looked like he wanted to disappear. Your Honor, O'Connell began, my client. I asked Ms. Arias, Judge Bell interrupted. Celeste's voice was barely audible. Yes. And did you disclose this transfer on your financial affidavit filed with this court? It was my mother's money. I was just. The bank records show the money originated from an account in your name, which was funded by regular transfers from a joint account you shared with Mr. Arias. Is that correct? Celeste didn't answer. Judge Bell set down his papers. Ms. Arias, lying to this court is a serious matter. Perjury can result in criminal charges. I'm inclined to dismiss your petition and refer this matter to the district attorney's office. Your Honor, please. O'Connell tried to salvage the situation. I've heard enough, Judge Bell said. Petition for emergency custody modification is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering Ms. Arias to return the $38,000 to Mr. Arias as restitution for fraud. Mr. Arias, you are under no legal obligation to provide financial support for children you did not father, particularly given the fraudulent circumstances of your marriage. This court finds that Ms. Arias knowingly and deliberately deceived you regarding paternity. Curtis felt something release in his chest. Vindication. Finally. But Judge Bell wasn't done. However, the judge continued, I want to address something that troubles me about this case. Mr. Arias, you spent 8 years, 6 years, and 4 years respectively raising these 3 children. You formed bonds with them. They call you daddy. And while I understand your anger at Ms. Arias, which is justified, I'm concerned about the children's welfare. Curtis tensed. This court cannot force you to maintain a relationship with children who are not biologically yours. But I strongly encourage you to consider what's in those children's best interests. They've lost one father figure. Their biological father is still adjusting to his role. Losing you entirely compounds that trauma. The judge paused, looking directly at Curtis. I'm not ordering you to do anything, but I'm asking you, as someone who clearly loved those children at one point, to think about what kind of man you want to be. Not for Ms. Arias' sake, but for theirs. The hearing adjourned. Curtis walked out of the courthouse in a daze. He'd won. Completely, utterly won. Celeste's petition was dismissed. He owed her nothing. The fraud was exposed. Justice, as he defined it, had been served. So why did he feel so hollow? Chapter 8. Choices. Curtis spent the next 2 weeks in a fog. He moved out of the hotel finally, renting a small apartment in Riverside. It was quiet, clean, and completely empty. No toys on the floor. No children's drawings on the fridge. No sounds of small feet running through the hallways. Just silence. Evan handled the final divorce paperwork. The $38,000 was returned to Curtis's account. The house sold quickly. California real estate market was hot, and Curtis pocketed a substantial profit. He was financially secure, legally vindicated, and completely alone. Renee visited on a Saturday afternoon, bringing beer and takeout. You look like hell, Armano, Renee said bluntly. Thanks. Seriously. You won. Celeste is broke and humiliated. Travis Harper lost his company and half his money. You're free. So why do you look like someone died? Curtis stared at his beer. Maybe someone did. Deep. Also cryptic. Want to explain? I keep thinking about what the judge said. About what kind of man I want to be. Renee nodded slowly. And what kind of man do you want to be? I wanted to be the guy who made them pay, who got justice, who didn't let them get away with it. And you were. You did all that. But I also wanted to be the guy who was there for those kids, who didn't abandon them even though everything was based on a lie. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Curtis. Aren't they? How do I look at Mason, Riley, and Harper without seeing Celeste's betrayal? How do I be in their lives without letting her back in mine? Renee thought about it. Maybe you don't have to figure it all out at once. Maybe you take it one day at a time. See the kids when you can, on your terms. Be present for them without sacrificing yourself. Travis is their father. Biologically, sure, but biology doesn't make you a father. Showing up does. And from what you've told me, Travis is doing the bare minimum. Those kids need more than the bare minimum. After Renee left, Curtis sat in his empty apartment and thought about everything that had happened over the past 9 months. The betrayal, the planning, the revenge, the victory. And he thought about Harper's small hand in his, Riley's drawings, Mason trying so hard to be brave. On Monday, Curtis called Miriam Boyd. I want to set up a visitation schedule, he said. Something regular. Once a week, maybe. Neutral location. Without Celeste. Miriam was quiet for a moment. Curtis, that's wonderful. The children will be so happy. I have conditions. Celeste doesn't get to use this as leverage. She doesn't get to ask me for money. She doesn't get to manipulate the situation. This is about the kids, period. I'll make sure she understands. And one more thing. I want to tell them the truth. Not now, but eventually. When they're old enough to understand. They deserve to know what happened. That's going to be difficult. I know. But I spent 9 years living in someone else's lie. I won't spend the rest of my life perpetuating it. The first visit was awkward. Curtis met the kids at a bowling alley in early May. Mason was tentative at first, testing whether Curtis was really back or would disappear again. Riley clung to him, afraid to let go. Harper just seemed happy to see Daddy. They bowled terribly. Curtis wasn't good at bowling even before 9 months of emotional trauma, and ate too much pizza and laughed. It felt both natural and strange, like putting on an old jacket that didn't quite fit anymore. But they did it again the next week, and the week after that. Slowly, carefully, Curtis rebuilt a relationship with 3 children who weren't his, but who he couldn't stop loving. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the family he'd thought he had. But it was something. And after everything, something was better than nothing. Travis, to his credit, was trying. He had his own visitation schedule, his own awkward attempts at building a relationship with children who were strangers to him. Curtis saw him occasionally during handoffs. They didn't speak much, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. They'd both been played by Celeste. They both lost something, and they were both trying, in their own ways, to do right by 3 kids who hadn't asked to be born into this mess. As for Celeste, Curtis heard about her only through Miriam. She'd gotten a job as a receptionist in Sacramento. She was living with her parents, trying to rebuild her life. According to Miriam, she was depressed, isolated, and realizing too late what she'd lost. Curtis felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not pity. Celeste had made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. That was enough. One evening in late June, exactly a year after Curtis had found the text message, he sat in his apartment and opened his laptop. He'd been thinking about something Judge Bell had said, about what kind of man he wanted to be. Curtis opened a document and started writing. Not for publication, not for anyone else to read, just for himself. I wanted revenge. I wanted Celeste to suffer the way she made me suffer. I wanted her to lose everything, the way I lost everything. And I got it. She's broke, unemployed, humiliated. Travis Harper is divorced and disgraced. I won, but winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. It didn't heal the betrayal. It didn't give me back the 9 years she stole. It didn't make me whole. What did help? What's helping is choosing to be there for Mason, Riley, and Harper. Not because I have to, not because a court ordered it, but because I want to, because love isn't just biology. It's choice. It's showing up. It's being present even when it hurts. Celeste took away my illusions. She showed me that the life I thought I had was built on lies. But she couldn't take away what was real, the moments I spent with those kids, the love I felt for them, the person I chose to be when it mattered. I'm not their biological father, but I'm choosing every day to be something to them. A mentor, a friend, maybe even still daddy, until they're old enough to understand the truth. That's not the ending I wanted when I gave Celeste her last Christmas gift, but might be the ending I need. Curtis saved the document and closed his laptop. Outside his window, the California sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow, he'd see the kids again. They were planning a trip to the zoo. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the life he'd imagined, but it was his. And for the first time in a year, that felt like enough. Chapter 9. Moving Forward. September brought cooler weather and new beginnings. Curtis stood outside Mason's elementary school on the first day of 4th grade, waiting with a dozen other parents. Mason emerged from the building, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking more grown-up than Curtis remembered. "How was it?" Curtis asked as Mason climbed into the truck. "Pretty good. Got Mrs. Chun for math. Everyone says she's strict, but fair." They drove to get ice cream, their Tuesday tradition. Curtis had been maintaining the visitation schedule for 4 months now, and they'd settled into a comfortable rhythm. Every Tuesday after school, he picked up Mason. Thursdays were Riley's day. She was doing better now. Her teacher said fewer outbursts and more focus. Saturdays belonged to Harper. Sometimes all 3 kids came together. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't what Curtis had imagined family would look like, but worked. "Dad," Mason said. He still called Curtis that, and Curtis had stopped correcting him. "Can I ask you something?" Curtis braced himself. "Sure." Riley heard some kids at school talking. "About you and Mom. About how we're not really your kids." Curtis pulled into the ice cream shop parking lot and shut off the engine. He'd known this conversation was coming eventually. He just hoped it would be later. What did Riley hear? That Mom cheated on you. That our real dad is some rich guy. That you left us because we're not really yours. Curtis turned to face Mason fully. "That's partially true, but it's not the whole story." "Then what's the whole story?" Curtis took a breath. "The truth is, your mom made some mistakes. Big ones. She had a relationship with another man, Travis, while she was married to me. And yes, Travis is your biological father. Mine too," he added, seeing Mason's stricken look. "When I found out, I was hurt. Really hurt. And angry. So I left. Because we're not yours. Because your mom lied to me for a long time. But Mason, I need you to understand something." Curtis put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Biology doesn't make you a father. Being there makes you a father. And for 8 years, I was there. I loved you, love you, like you were my own. Because in every way that matters, you were. Then why did you leave?" "Because I needed time to figure out how to deal with what your mom did without letting it destroy me. But I came back. Because you, Riley, and Harper, you 3 didn't do anything wrong. And you deserved better than to be caught in the middle of adult problems." Mason was quiet for a long time. "The kids at school said you hated us now." "Never." Curtis's voice was firm. "I have never hated you. Not for 1 second. But we're not really your kids." Curtis smiled sadly. "You're not my biological children, but you're still kids I helped raise. Kids I taught to ride bikes and read bedtime stories to. Kids I care about. That doesn't just disappear because of DNA. What should I tell the kids at school? Tell them whatever you want. Tell them it's complicated. Tell them it's none of their business. Or don't tell them anything at all. But Mason, I want you to know something else." "What?" "You have 2 fathers now. Travis and me. And that's okay. Travis is trying to be there for you. I know it's awkward and new, but he's trying. And I'll be here too, as much as you want me to be. You don't have to choose between us." "Travis isn't you," Mason said quietly. Curtis felt his heart constrict. "Give him time. He's learning. But yeah, he's not me. Because I had 8 years with you, and he's just starting. But that doesn't mean he can't be important to you too." They got ice cream, chocolate for Mason, vanilla for Curtis, and sat outside eating it while the September sun warmed their faces. "Are you happy now?" Mason asked suddenly. Curtis thought about it. "I'm getting there. It's been a hard year. But yeah, I think I'm getting there." "Good. Because when you left, I thought it was my fault. Like I did something wrong." Curtis pulled Mason into a hug. "No, none of this was your fault. Not yours, not Riley's, not Harper's. This was adult stuff that got messy. But you three? You're the best parts of this whole situation. That evening, Curtis had dinner with Renee at their favorite taco place. Curtis filled him in on the conversation with Mason. How'd it feel? Renee asked. Hard, but necessary. He needed to hear the truth. You handled it well. Better than I would have. I've had a lot of practice at hard conversations this year. Renee raised his beer. To surviving hard years. Curtis clinked his bottle against Renee's. To surviving. But survival wasn't enough anymore. Curtis was realizing he wanted more than just to survive. He wanted to actually live again. He'd started seeing a therapist in August, a decision he'd resisted for months, but finally admitted he needed. Dr. Yolanda Galloway was blunt, insightful, and didn't let Curtis hide behind his anger. You've spent a year punishing Celeste, she'd said during their last session, and you were justified in seeking consequences. But Curtis, at some point, you need to decide. Do you want to spend the rest of your life defined by what she did to you? Or do you want to build something new? The question stayed with Curtis, because the truth was he'd been so focused on revenge, on making Celeste pay, that he'd forgotten to think about what came after. Now, sitting in the taco place with his brother, Curtis thought about possibilities. He thought about the new engineering project he'd been offered at work, a promotion with more responsibility and better pay. He thought about the house he'd started looking at, a smaller place with a yard big enough for the kids to visit. He thought about maybe, eventually, dating again, though that felt impossibly far away right now. Mostly, he thought about the kids, about being present for Mason's baseball games and Riley's art shows and Harper's preschool graduation next year, about building something real with them, even if it looked different than he'd imagined. I've been thinking, Curtis said to Renee, about moving forward, really moving forward, not just existing. Yeah? What does that look like? I don't know exactly, but I think it starts with letting go of the anger, not forgetting what happened, but not letting it consume me either. That's growth, hermano. Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of being angry all the time. Renee grinned. Those aren't mutually exclusive. In October, Travis reached out to Curtis directly for the first time. They met for coffee, awkward and stilted, two men who'd been connected by betrayal, trying to figure out how to coexist. The kids talk about you, Travis said. A lot. Mason especially. He compares me to you constantly. Curtis didn't know what to say to that. I'm not trying to replace you, Travis continued. I know I can't. You were there for their whole lives. I'm the stranger trying to figure out how to be a father to kids who already have one. They need you too, Curtis said carefully. Biology matters. And you're trying. I can see that. I wish I tried 9 years ago. I wish I'd been brave enough to leave Kate back then, to acknowledge the kids, to do the right thing. Instead, I hid and let you raise my children. You can't change the past. I know, but I can try to do better now. Curtis, I wanted to ask, is there a way we can coordinate on the kids? Make sure we're not contradicting each other or confusing them. Curtis had been prepared to hate Travis Harper, had hated him for months. But sitting across from him now, Curtis saw just another flawed man trying to clean up a mess he'd helped create. Yeah, Curtis said, we can figure that out. They started meeting monthly, Curtis, Travis, and sometimes Miriam, to coordinate on the kids. It was strange and uncomfortable, but it was also necessary. The kids needed consistency, needed to know the adults in their lives were working together rather than against each other. Celeste was notably absent from these meetings. She'd agreed to Curtis's visitation terms and largely removed herself from the coordination process. According to Miriam, she was struggling with depression and had started therapy. Curtis felt still nothing. That well of emotion where Celeste was concerned had gone completely dry. By December, a full year since Christmas morning, Curtis had settled into his new life. He had the apartment, though he was still looking for a house. He had his weekly time with the kids. He had his work, his brother, his therapy sessions. He had something resembling peace. On December 24th, Curtis took all 3 kids to see Christmas lights at a local park. They walked through the displays, drinking hot chocolate, while Mason pointed out his favorite decorations and Harper tried to touch every light she could reach. This is nice, Riley said, slipping her hand into Curtis's. Like old times. Yeah, Curtis agreed. Like old times. Except it wasn't, not really. The old times were gone, built on foundations that had crumbled. This was something new, harder one, more complicated, but maybe more honest. As they walked back to Curtis's truck, Harper turned to him. Are you going to disappear again? The question hit Curtis hard. No, sweetie. I'm not disappearing. Promise. Curtis picked her up, looked her in the eyes. I promise. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Good. Because we need you. That night, after dropping the kids back with Miriam, Curtis drove to his apartment and sat in the quiet. He thought about the gift he'd given Celeste exactly 1 year ago. The USB drive, the evidence, the exposure. He'd wanted her to suffer, and she had. But Curtis had suffered too. The revenge had cost him. His peace, his family as he knew it, a year of his life consumed by anger and pain. Was it worth it? Curtis thought about that question for a long time. And finally, he decided yes and no. Yes, because Celeste needed to face consequences. Because lies that big couldn't go unpunished. Because Curtis deserved justice and truth and validation. No, because revenge didn't heal him. It didn't give him back what he'd lost. It didn't make him whole. What was making him whole, slowly, painfully, was choosing to move forward. Choosing to be present for the kids. Choosing to build a new life rather than staying trapped in the ruins of the old one. Curtis opened his laptop and pulled up the document he'd written in June. He read through it, then added one final entry. A year ago, I gave Celeste her last Christmas gift, exposure, consequences, justice. I thought that would be the end of the story. The villain punished, the hero victorious, the end. But life isn't that clean. The story didn't end on Christmas morning. It kept going, and I had to figure out how to live in the aftermath. I'm still figuring it out. Still learning how to be there for kids who aren't mine biologically, but who I can't stop loving. Still learning how to forgive myself for the year I spent consumed by revenge. Still learning what it means to move forward. Celeste destroyed my illusions, but she couldn't destroy me. Only I could do that, and I chose not to. That's my real victory. Not the revenge. Not the public humiliation. Not the court win. My real victory is choosing to be more than what she made me. Choosing to build something from the wreckage. Choosing to be the man I want to be, not the man betrayal tried to turn me into. That's the ending I choose. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. Curtis saved the document, closed his laptop, and looked out his window at the December night. Somewhere across town, Mason, Riley, and Harper were probably asleep, dreaming of Christmas morning tomorrow. Curtis would see them in the afternoon. Another Christmas, another chance to be present, another step forward. It wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the family he'd imagined. But it was enough. And after everything, enough was exactly what Curtis needed it to be. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Humiliation. The gold Lamborghini Huracan gleamed under the valet lights of Chateau Noir, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. Mario Burt stood in his simple black suit, watching his wife Jasmine laugh with her father as they approached the entrance. Gerald McCarthy, oil tycoon and self-made billionaire, jangled his keys with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never been told no. My wife's rich dad threw his car keys at me. Go park my Lambo, boy. It's the closest you'll ever get to one, Gerald sneered, his weathered face twisted in amusement. The keys struck Mario's chest and fell to the ground with a metallic clink. Jasmine Burt, née McCarthy, covered her mouth as she giggled. Be careful, honey, he might scratch it. Her emerald dress sparkled as she turned to follow her father toward the mahogany doors. You know how clumsy you can be. Mario bent slowly to retrieve the keys, his jaw tight. 3 years of marriage, and she still treated him like the struggling construction worker she'd met at a charity gala. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that Mario Burt had clawed his way up from nothing to build an empire worth $200 million. He'd kept his wealth hidden, using shell companies and trust funds, watching and waiting. The manager, a thin man named Albert Hanna, rushed toward Gerald and Jasmine as they reached the entrance. "Wait a minute," Albert called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "Our owner is coming." Gerald paused, straightening his tie. "About time. I've been waiting 3 months for this reservation." Then Mario entered through the main doors, having slipped inside through the staff entrance. The transformation was immediate. Gone was the submissive husband. In his place stood a man who commanded respect, whose presence filled the room. Albert bowed, slightly as Mario approached. "Mr. Burt," Albert said formally, "your table is ready, sir." Gerald and Jasmine turned pale as fresh snow. The keys to the Lamborghini felt heavy in Mario's palm as he smiled coldly at his wife and father-in-law. "Welcome to Chateau Noir," Mario said, his voice carrying the authority of ownership. "I believe you have a reservation under McCarthy." Gerald's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Jasmine's face drained of color, her emerald dress suddenly seeming too bright against her pallid skin. "How?" Gerald began. "How what?" Mario interrupted, stepping closer. "How does the boy you just humiliated own the restaurant you've been dying to get into? How does the man you treat like hired help have enough money to buy your oil company 3 times over?" The backstory was simple yet brutal. Mario had grown up in the foster system after his parents died in a car accident when he was 8. By 16, he was living on the streets. By 21, he'd built his first construction company with borrowed tools and sheer determination. By 25, he owned half the commercial real estate in the city. He'd learned early that people revealed their true nature when they thought you were beneath them. Jasmine had been different then, or so he'd thought. They'd met at a charity function for homeless youth. Ironic, considering she was now looking at him like he was a stranger. She'd been volunteering. He'd been the guest speaker. She'd seemed genuine, interested in his story, in him. They'd dated for 2 years before marrying in a simple ceremony. Mario had kept his wealth hidden, wanting to ensure her love was real. Now, watching her face cycle through shock, confusion, and something darker, he realized he'd been a fool. "Mario!" Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. "What's going on?" "What's going on," Mario said, tossing Gerald's keys to the actual valet, "is that you've been living a lie for 3 years. Both of you." Gerald's face reddened. "You let us think. I'll let you show me exactly who you are." Mario cut him off. "And now I know everything I need to know." Inside the restaurant, Mario led them to a private dining room. The walls were lined with photos of Mario with senators, celebrities, and business moguls. Awards and certificates bearing his name covered one wall entirely. "How long?" Gerald demanded, sinking into his chair. "How long have I been rich?" Mario poured himself a glass of wine, leaving his guests empty-handed. "Since before I met your daughter." "How long have I known about her affair with Sean Vargas?" 3 months. "How long have I been planning what comes next?" 3 months and 1 day. Jasmine's fork clattered to her plate. "You know about Sean?" "I know everything about Sean. I know he's Gerald's business partner's son. I know he promised you a life your poor husband could never give you. I know you've been meeting him at the Meridian Hotel every Tuesday and Friday afternoon. Room 247. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. I know he's been feeding you lies about leaving his wife, about the 2 of you starting fresh somewhere exotic. What you don't know is that Sean's wife, Terry, is my business partner's daughter. Small world, isn't it?" Gerald leaned forward. "What do you want?" Mario smiled, and it was the coldest expression either of them had ever seen. "I want you to understand that the game has changed. You're not the players anymore. You're the pieces." As they sat in stunned silence, Mario excused himself to make a phone call. In a hallway, he dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. "Dwight? It's Mario." "Yes, it's time to begin." Chapter 2. The Discovery. The affair had started 4 months ago, but Mario had known about it for 3 months and 6 days. He remembered the exact moment, because it was the first time in his adult life that he'd felt completely powerless. He'd come home early from a business trip to surprise Jasmine, carrying flowers and a diamond bracelet worth more than most people's cars. The house was quiet, but her car was in the driveway. He'd climbed the stairs, already imagining her smile when she saw the gift. Instead, he'd heard them through the bedroom door. "When are you going to leave him?" Sean Vargas's voice carried through the thin walls of their modest home. Another lie Mario maintained to keep his wealth hidden. "Soon," Jasmine had replied, her voice breathy with passion. "I just need to figure out the best way. Mario's so pathetic, I almost feel sorry for him." "Poor little construction worker," Sean had laughed. "At least he's good with his hands, right? For manual labor, I mean." Their laughter had cut deeper than any physical wound. Mario had spent that night in his real home, a penthouse across town that Jasmine knew nothing about. He'd sat in his study, surrounded by monitors displaying his business empire, and planned their destruction. Now, 3 months later, the plan was in motion. Sean Vargas was everything Mario pretended not to be. Born into wealth, educated at Ivy League schools, married to Terry Osborne, daughter of one of the most powerful men in the state. Sean's father, Brian Wolf, was Gerald McCarthy's business partner in a massive oil drilling project in the Gulf of Mexico. What Sean didn't know was that Mario owned the drilling rights to the adjacent waters through a shell company. What Gerald didn't know was that his permits were about to be revoked due to environmental concerns that Mario had been carefully orchestrating for months. Back at the restaurant, Mario returned to find Jasmine crying and Gerald making angry phone calls. "My lawyers say you can't do this," Gerald said without looking up. "Do what?" Mario asked innocently. "Own a restaurant? Make money? Marry your daughter under false pretenses? Which part exactly can I do? You know what I mean?" Mario sat down and cut into his steak. "I'm afraid I don't. Please enlighten me." Gerald's face was purple now. "You think you can destroy my business because my daughter made a mistake?" "A mistake?" Mario chewed thoughtfully. "Is that what we're calling a 4-month affair? How refreshingly modern of you." Jasmine looked up, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Mario, please. We can work this out. I love you." "No," Mario said quietly. "You love what you thought I couldn't give you. Security, status, money. The problem is I had all of those things. I just wanted to see if you could love the man instead of the wallet." He pulled out his phone and showed them a series of photos. Jasmine and Sean entering the hotel. Jasmine and Sean in compromising positions by the pool. Jasmine and Sean planning their future together. "The private investigator was very thorough," Mario explained. "He's also very discreet. For now, what do you want?" Jasmine whispered. Mario leaned back in his chair. "I want you to understand that every choice has consequences. Sean chose to seduce a married woman. You chose to betray your vows. Gerald chose to humiliate me publicly. Now you all get to live with the results." His phone buzzed. A text from Dwight Hoffman. "Phase 1 complete. The permits are suspended pending investigation." Mario smiled. "Gerald, I'd check your messages if I were you." Gerald's phone rang immediately. His face went from purple to ashen as he listened to the voice on the other end. "Impossible," he muttered. "We had all the proper documentation." "Did you?" Mario asked. "Because I'm looking at a report that says there's been a significant oil spill in the area. Kill a lot of fish. The EPA is very upset. They're considering criminal charges." "There was no spill," Gerald shouted. "Wasn't there?" Mario pulled up another file on his phone. "Because I have photos, timestamps, water samples. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you own the testing company." The room fell silent except for Gerald's labored breathing. "You fabricated evidence," Jasmine said, her voice hollow. "I created leverage," Mario corrected. "Sean's father, Brian, is about to lose everything because of this investigation. Sean's trust fund? Gone. His inheritance? Evaporated. His wife? Well, Terry's father doesn't like men who destroy the family business." Mario stood up and straightened his tie. "You three have 36 hours to make your choices. Jasmine, you can file for divorce and walk away with nothing, or you can drag this out, and I'll make sure every society page in the country knows about your affair. Gerald, you can publicly apologize for your behavior tonight, or you can watch your business empire crumble under federal investigation. And Sean, Jasmine asked. Mario's smile was arctic. Sean gets to learn what it feels like to lose everything he never earned in the first place. As Mario walked toward the exit, Albert approached with a concerned expression. Sir, is everything all right? Everything's perfect, Albert. Please ensure my guests have whatever they need. And Albert, send them the bill for tonight's dinner. All of it. The wine, the private room, the chef's special preparations. I think a $10,000 meal will help them remember this evening. Outside, Mario retrieved his phone and made another call. Wilson, it's time for phase 2. Yes, I want everything. Bank records, credit reports, social media accounts. I want to know every secret they've ever kept. The valet brought Mario's car around. Not the modest sedan Jasmine knew about, but a black McLaren 720S worth more than most people's homes. As he drove away from Chateau Noir, Mario felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The game was no longer about hiding who he was. Now it was about showing them exactly who they'd chosen to cross. Behind him, through the restaurant's windows, he could see 3 figures still sitting at the table, their world crashing down around them with the weight of their own choices. The real revenge was just beginning. Chapter 3. The Setup. Mario's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Meridian Tower, a building he owned through one of his many shell companies. Ironically, it was the same hotel where Jasmine and Sean conducted their affair, just 40 floors above their usual meeting place. The next morning, Mario stood in his study watching the news. Channel 7 was running a story about the environmental disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, complete with aerial shots of oil-slicked water and dead marine life. The reporter, a woman named Cora McCarty, no relation to Gerald despite the name, was describing the worst ecological disaster in the region's history. Mario's phone rang. Dwight Hoffman's name appeared on the screen. The samples are holding up under scrutiny, Dwight reported. Our marine biologist confirms everything looks authentic. The EPA is moving forward with the investigation. And Brian Wolf? Panicking. He's been calling Gerald every 20 minutes since the story broke. Sean's trust fund has been frozen pending the outcome of the investigation. Mario nodded, watching a pelican struggle to fly with oil-covered wings. What about the hotel footage? Delivered to Terry Osborne this morning, along with a complete dossier on her husband's activities. Her father received a copy as well. Good. Have Wilson prepare the financial documents for Phase 3. I want Gerald's credit lines called in simultaneously. After ending the call, Mario showered and dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Gerald paid his best employees in a month. He had meetings scheduled with 3 different city council members, a federal judge, and the mayor's chief of staff. By evening, Gerald McCarthy would understand the true meaning of powerlessness. The first meeting was with Earl Schultz, the city's longest-serving council member and a man who owed his political career to Mario's strategic donations. You're asking me to revoke permits on private property, Earl said nervously, reading through the documents Mario had provided. I'm asking you to enforce existing zoning laws, Mario corrected. Gerald's new downtown development violates height restrictions established in 1987. The fact that previous council members chose to overlook these violations doesn't make them legal. Earl shifted uncomfortably. This would shut down a $200 million project. That's not my concern. Following the law is. And the timing? Right after this oil spill business. Mario's expression didn't change. Coincidences happen, Earl. The question is whether you want to be on the right side of the law when this gets investigated. The threat was subtle but clear. Earl had taken bribes for years, never from Mario, but Mario had the evidence nonetheless. Sometimes being thorough meant collecting insurance policies you hoped never to use. I'll call an emergency session, Earl conceded. I thought you might see reason. The second meeting with federal judge Nathaniel Aguilar was more complex. Mario needed criminal charges filed against the Wolf-McCarthy Partnership for environmental crimes, but he also needed those charges to lead exactly where he wanted them to go. The evidence is compelling, Judge Aguilar admitted, reviewing the fabricated oil spill documentation. But federal environmental crimes require intent to prove willful negligence, which is why I'm providing this, Mario said, sliding a folder across the mahogany desk. Inside were emails between Brian Wolf and Gerald McCarthy discussing cost-cutting measures on safety equipment, dated 3 months before the supposed spill. The emails were forgeries, but they were perfect forgeries created by a team of specialists who usually work for intelligence agencies. "How did you obtain these?" the judge asked. A concerned whistleblower came forward, someone with access to internal communications who was horrified by what they saw. "I'll need to verify their authenticity." "Of course. I've included contact information for the whistleblower. He's prepared to testify under oath." The whistleblower was actually Grant Branch, a former Wolf McCarthy employee who'd been fired for exposing safety violations 2 years ago. Mario had found Grant living in poverty, bitter and angry. For $50,000 and a new identity, Grant was happy to play his part in bringing down his former employers. By the time Mario finished his 3rd meeting, Gerald McCarthy's world was collapsing at precisely the speed Mario had calculated. That evening, Mario sat in his penthouse study, monitoring multiple phone conversations through surveillance equipment that definitely violated federal law, but was completely untraceable. He listened to Gerald screaming at his lawyers, to Brian Wolf demanding explanations from the EPA, and to Sean Vargas begging his wife for forgiveness. The most interesting conversation was between Jasmine and her mother, Lynn Wade McCarthy. "I don't understand how this happened," Jasmine was saying. "Mario was nobody. He fixed things and carried heavy objects. How does someone like that become powerful enough to destroy Daddy's business?" "Maybe you should have paid attention to the man you married instead of the money you thought you wanted," Lynn replied coldly. "You don't understand. Sean and we had plans." That is the operative phrase. Sean's wife threw him out this morning. His father disowned him this afternoon. His trust fund is frozen indefinitely. Whatever plans you had, I suggest you make new ones. I could go back to Mario, beg for forgiveness. For what your father tells me, Mario isn't the forgiving type. You made your choice, Jasmine. Now you get to live with the consequences. Mario ended the surveillance feed and poured himself a glass of whiskey that cost more than most people made in a week. Tomorrow would bring Phase 3, the complete financial destruction of everyone who had betrayed him. But tonight, he had a special visitor coming. The elevator chimed at exactly 9 o'clock. Terry Osborne stepped into Mario's penthouse, her designer dress perfectly pressed despite the emotional devastation of her day. "Mr. Burt," she said formally, "thank you for agreeing to see me. Mrs. Vargas, please sit down." Terry was everything Jasmine pretended to be, elegant, intelligent, and genuinely powerful in her own right. Her father, Jimmy Sears, owned the largest construction company in the state. She managed the business side of their empire while he handled the physical operations. "I received your package this morning," she said without preamble. "I thought you should know the truth about your husband." "Why?" Her brown eyes studied Mario intently. "What do you gain from destroying my marriage?" "Your marriage was already destroyed. I just provided you with the evidence." Terry nodded slowly. "I filed for divorce. Sean will get nothing. I assumed as much. But that's not why I'm here." She leaned forward slightly. "I want to know what else you're planning. My family's business works closely with Wolf Construction. If they go down, we could be affected." Mario smiled. Finally, someone who understood how the game was really played. "Your family's business will be fine. In fact, I have a proposition that might interest you." "I'm listening." Gerald McCarthy is about to lose everything. His construction permits are being revoked, his oil partnership is under federal investigation, and his credit lines are being called in. Someone will need to take over his downtown development project. Someone like my father's company. Someone exactly like your father's company. For about 30 cents on the dollar. Terry's smile was sharp and predatory. "And what do you want in return?" "Your husband has caused me considerable emotional distress. I think he should face the consequences of his actions in a very personal way." "What kind of consequences?" Mario stood and walked to his window, looking down at the city lights. "Sean thinks he understands power because he was born into money. I want to learn what real power looks like." Meaning tomorrow morning, Sean is going to receive a visit from some very upset investors who believe he stole their money. They're going to be very persuasive in their demands for repayment. Terry was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about physical violence. I'm talking about education. Sean has lived his entire life without consequences. It's time he learned what happens when you take what doesn't belong to you. And if I don't help you, Mario turned back to face her. Then you get to watch your family's business suffer when Wolf Construction defaults on their contracts. Gerald's projects represent 40% of your father's revenue. If those contracts disappear, the threat hung in the air like smoke. What exactly do you need from me? Terry asked finally. Tomorrow afternoon, Sean will be desperate for money. He'll come to you begging for help, promising to change, swearing he'll do anything to fix what he's broken. I need you to send him to a specific location. Where? Mario wrote an address on a piece of paper and handed it to her. An abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. Tell him there's a businessman there who might be willing to help him out of his current difficulties. And then Sean learns what happens to people who steal what belongs to Mario Burt. Terry studied the address for a moment, then looked back at Mario. You're not just destroying their finances. You're destroying them completely. Yes. Good, she said, standing up. Sean humiliated me for months. Jasmine helped him do it. Gerald treated you like a servant. They all deserve whatever you have planned. As Terry left, Mario returned to his window. Below, the city sprawled out like a circuit board, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Tomorrow, 3 of those lives would change forever. Mario picked up his phone and dialed one final number. Jack, it's time. Yes, bring Abel and Carl. Make sure they understand. I want him scared, not dead. This isn't about killing him. It's about teaching him what real fear feels like. Phase 3 was about to begin, and Mario had no intention of showing mercy to anyone who had betrayed him. The boy who threw car keys at Mario Burt was about to meet the man who owned the keys to everyone's future. Chapter 4. The Trap Titans. Sean Vargas sat in his Porsche outside the abandoned warehouse, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. 12 hours ago, he'd been the heir to a construction fortune. Now he was a man with nothing, desperate enough to meet a stranger in the industrial district based on his estranged wife's recommendation. The morning had been a symphony of destruction orchestrated by Mario's careful planning. Sean's credit cards had been canceled simultaneously at 8 a.m. His bank accounts were frozen due to suspicious activity by 8:30. By 9 a.m., his father had disowned him publicly, releasing a statement to the press about cutting ties with family members who bring shame to the Wolf name. But the real blow had come at 10 a.m., when 3 men in expensive suits had visited Sean's downtown apartment. Jack Nichols was the kind of man who collected debts for people who preferred to remain anonymous. His associates, Abel Morse and Carl Richardson, specialized in making problems disappear permanently. They'd explained to Sean, in very clear terms, that he owed money to some very dangerous people. $500,000, Jack had said, settling into Sean's leather chair like he owned it. You borrowed it 6 months ago to cover some gambling debts. Now, these people want it back. I never borrowed any money, Sean had protested. Carl had smiled, pulling out a folder thick with documentation. Says here you did. Got your signature and everything. Even got witnesses. The documents were forgeries, but they were perfect forgeries. Sean's signature had been copied from the affair photos Mario had obtained. Hotel registrations, credit card receipts, anything with Sean's handwriting. The witnesses were real people Mario had paid to remember meetings that never happened. I want my money by midnight, Jack had continued. With interest. Call it 600,000, round numbers. I don't have that kind of money. Then you better find it. These people don't accept payment plans. Now Sean sat outside the warehouse, hoping the mystery businessman Terry had mentioned could somehow solve his problems. His phone buzzed with another threatening text from Jack. 11 hours left. Hope you like broken bones. Inside the warehouse, Mario watched Sean through security cameras he'd installed the week before. The building belonged to him, purchased through another shell company months ago, specifically for this purpose. It had been a clothing factory once, but now it was empty except for the carefully staged setup Mario had arranged. He's been sitting out there for 20 minutes, reported Wilson Klein, Mario's head of security. Think he's getting cold feet. He'll come in, Mario said confidently. Desperation is a powerful motivator. Wilson nodded toward the three men standing nearby. And if he tries to run, he won't get far. Brandon's watching the back exit. Ignacio's covering the side entrance. If Sean leaves this warehouse, it won't be the way he came in. Finally, Sean gathered enough courage to enter the building. The main door creaked open, echoing through the empty space. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through broken windows. "Hello," Sean called out, his voice betraying his fear. "Is anyone here? Terry said someone wanted to meet me." Mario stepped out of the shadows. No longer the humble construction worker, or even the restaurant owner from the night before. Now he wore a black tactical vest and dark jeans, looking like exactly what he was, a predator who had cornered his prey. "Hello, Sean," Mario said quietly. Sean's face went white. "You?" But Terry said exactly what I told her to say. Surprised? You shouldn't be. When you destroy someone's marriage, you shouldn't expect their ex-wife to help you. Sean backed toward the door, but Brandon Bullock stepped into view, blocking the exit. All 6'4" of Brandon's frame filled the doorway completely. "Going somewhere?" Mario asked. "What do you want?" Sean's voice cracked like a teenager's. "I want you to understand something very important," Mario said, walking closer. "You spent 4 months thinking you were taking something from me. My wife, my life, my future. But what you were really doing was taking something from yourself. I don't understand. Your freedom," Mario explained patiently. "Your safety, your future. See, when you decided to seduce my wife, you made an enemy. And I'm not the kind of enemy who forgives and forgets." Sean's eyes darted around the warehouse, looking for another exit. "Look, I'm sorry about Jasmine. We can work something out. I'll pay you back somehow. Pay me back." Mario laughed, the sound echoing off the empty walls. "You think this is about money? You think you can write a check and make this go away? Then what do you want?" Mario pulled out his phone and showed Sean a video. It was security footage from the hotel where Sean and Jasmine had met, but the timestamp showed yesterday, long after Mario had revealed his true identity to them. "This was taken 24 hours ago," Mario said. "Even after you knew who I really was, even after you knew what I was capable of, you still met with my wife. You still thought you could take what was mine." In the video, Sean and Jasmine were arguing in the hotel parking lot. Their voices weren't audible, but their body language told the story clearly. Sean demanding that Jasmine leave with him, Jasmine refusing, Sean grabbing her arm roughly when she tried to walk away. "You put your hands on her," Mario continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You physically forced her to stay when she wanted to leave. That makes you something worse than an adulterer, Sean. That makes you an abuser. It wasn't like that. She was being unreasonable. She was trying to end a relationship that had become dangerous for everyone involved. You were trying to force her to abandon her entire life for a man who couldn't even stay loyal to his own wife." Mario nodded to Wilson, who handed him a manila folder. "Let me show you what your future looks like," Mario said, opening the folder. "Jack Nichols and his friends? They're real debt collectors. The $500,000 you supposedly owe? That's real too, as far as the legal system is concerned." He showed Sean the first document, a loan agreement bearing Sean's forged signature. "The witnesses who will testify that you borrowed this money, they're real people with real identities and no criminal records. When they testify under oath that you borrowed money from the wrong people, who's going to believe your story about being framed?" The second document was even worse. A police report filed that morning claiming Sean had assaulted a woman during a drug deal gone wrong. The woman was an actress Mario had hired, but her story would be convincing enough to add assault charges to Sean's growing legal problems. "The beauty of this," Mario continued, "is that none of it is technically illegal. The debt is real, even if it's fabricated. The witnesses are telling the truth about what they've been paid to remember. The assault charge is based on a real complaint filed by a real person." Sean sank to his knees on the dirty warehouse floor. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll disappear. I'll never come back to the city. Just please don't do this." "You had that option yesterday," Mario said coldly. "You could have walked away when you realized who I was. Instead, you chose to double down. You chose to put your hands on my wife and demand that she choose between her marriage and her safety. Mario's phone buzzed with a text message. He smiled as he read it. Good news, he told Sean. Your father just declared bankruptcy. The federal investigation into the oil spill has expanded to include all of Wolf Construction's projects for the past 5 years. Turns out you've been cutting corners on safety regulations for a long time. That's impossible. We follow all safety protocols. Do you? Because I have employees who are willing to testify otherwise. Former employees who were fired for reporting safety violations. Employees who have very detailed records of conversations with your father about saving money by ignoring regulations. The truth was that Wolf Construction had been cutting corners, just not to the extent Mario's witnesses would claim. But the real violations provided enough foundation to make the fabricated ones believable. Grant Branch sends his regards, by the way, Mario added. He's particularly looking forward to testifying about the time your father told him to shut up or find another job when he reported structural weaknesses in the Meridian Tower Foundation. Sean's face went completely white. The Meridian Tower? But that's where hundreds of people live and work every day, yes. Imagine how the families will feel when they learn their homes and offices might collapse because Brian Wolf wanted to save money on concrete. The Meridian Tower was structurally sound. Mario owned it and had had it inspected thoroughly. But Grant's testimony would plant enough doubt to force a complete evacuation and reconstruction, costing the Wolf family everything they had left. Your father will spend the rest of his life in federal prison, Mario continued. Your mother will lose the house, the cars, everything. Your sister Kelly Mills will have to explain to her children why Grandpa is a convicted criminal. My sister has nothing to do with this. Neither did I, until you decided to take what was mine. Mario walked to where Sean knelt on the floor and crouched down to meet his eyes. Here's what's going to happen, he said quietly. In 1 hour, Jack Nichols is going to find you. He's going to collect the money you owe, one way or another. If you don't have it, and you won't, he's going to break both your legs and dump you outside the city limits. You can't do this. I could do whatever I want. I have more money than you ever dreamed of, more connections than you can imagine, and more patience than you deserve. I spent months planning this moment, and I'm going to savor every second of watching your world burn. Mario stood up and walked toward the exit. Oh, and Sean, when you're sitting in that hospital bed with your legs in casts, thinking about how your life went wrong, remember this. I gave you a chance to walk away. You chose to stay and fight. Now you get to live with the consequences. As Mario reached the door, Sean called out desperately. What about Jasmine? What are you going to do to her? Mario paused and looked back. Jasmine made her choice. She chose you over me, chose excitement over stability, chose what she thought would make her happy over what actually would. Now she gets to discover what life with nothing looks like. She loves you. No, Mario said sadly. She loved what she thought I couldn't give her. She never bothered to find out who I really was. Just like you never bothered to find out what I was really capable of. The warehouse door slammed shut behind Mario, leaving Sean alone with his fear and the approaching sound of footsteps from the shadows. Jack Nichols stepped into the light, cracking his knuckles with a sound like breaking bones. "Time to pay up," Jack said cheerfully. "Hope you've got good health insurance." Outside, Mario climbed into his McLaren and drove away without looking back. Phase 3 was complete. Phase 4 would be even more personal. It was time to deal with Jasmine. Chapter 5. Confrontations and Emotional Depth. Jasmine Burt stood in the kitchen of the modest home she'd shared with Mario for 3 years, staring at the divorce papers that had been delivered that morning. The house felt different now. Smaller, shabbier, like a costume she'd outgrown. Everything that had once seemed charming about their simple life now felt like evidence of the lies they'd been living. Her phone buzzed with another news alert about her father's business troubles. The headlines were getting worse. Environmental disaster linked to construction fraud. Wolf McCarthy partnership under federal investigation. Billionaire Gerald McCarthy declares bankruptcy. She tried calling Mario 17 times since leaving the restaurant the night before. Each call went straight to voicemail. Each voicemail was the same. "Mario, please call me back. We need to talk." I can explain everything. But what was there to explain? That she'd fallen in love with another man because she thought her husband was poor? That she'd laughed when her father humiliated him because she was embarrassed by what she thought was his low status? That every day of their marriage had been built on her assumption that she was settling for less than she deserved? The front door opened, and for a moment Jasmine's heart leaped. But it wasn't Mario. It was Lynn Wade McCarthy, her mother, looking older than Jasmine had ever seen her. "Pack your things," Lynn said without preamble. "The bank is foreclosing on this house tomorrow." "What? But this is our home." "Your home belongs to a shell company owned by your husband." Apparently, Mario has been paying the mortgage for 3 years. Now that he's filing for divorce, he's terminating the lease. Jasmine sank into one of the kitchen chairs she'd thought they'd bought together at a second-hand store. Now she wondered if it was actually worth more than her car. "How much of our life was a lie?" she asked. "All of it," Lynn replied bluntly. "The struggling construction worker, the modest income, the financial stress you thought you were living under, all lies. Your husband is worth more money than your father ever was." "But why? Why would he hide that from me?" Lynn pulled out her phone and showed Jasmine a news article from 3 years ago. Local business magnate Mario Bird announces anonymous donation to Foster Youth Foundation. The photo showed Mario in an expensive suit, shaking hands with the charity's director. The caption identified him as reclusive millionaire Mario Bird, whose construction empire has transformed the city's skyline. "This was taken 2 months before you met him," Lynn said. "He was already rich when you started dating. He chose to hide it from you." "But why would he do that?" "Maybe he wanted to see if you could love him for who he was instead of what he had. Apparently, you failed the test." The words hit Jasmine like physical blows. She remembered their early dates. Mario talking about growing up in foster care, about working construction jobs to pay for night school, about dreaming of building something meaningful. She'd been charmed by his stories, moved by his struggles, impressed by his determination to succeed despite his circumstances. But she'd also been secretly relieved when Sean entered her life, offering her the lifestyle she'd grown up expecting. Sean's wealth was visible, obvious, comfortable. He took her to expensive restaurants, bought her designer clothes, promised her a life of luxury that her poor husband could never provide. "Have you heard from Sean?" Lynn asked. "Not since yesterday. His phone goes straight to voicemail." Lynn's expression darkened. "You might want to turn on the news." The local evening news was running a story about a man found beaten in an abandoned warehouse. The victim was identified as Sean Vargas, son of prominent businessman Brian Wolf. He was alive, but in critical condition with 2 broken legs, a fractured skull, and internal injuries. Police believe this was connected to gambling debts, the reporter was saying. Mr. Vargas was reportedly involved with loan sharks who became violent when he couldn't repay what he owed. Jasmine's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She dialed Mario's number again, and this time he answered. "Hello, Jasmine. Did you do this?" she whispered. "Do what?" "Sean. The warehouse. The beating. Sean made some poor financial decisions. I had nothing to do with the consequences." "You're lying." "Am I? Can you prove I was anywhere near that warehouse? Can you prove I know anything about his gambling debts? Can you prove I've done anything except discover that my wife was cheating on me?" Jasmine closed her eyes. "Mario, please. We need to talk. We are talking. In person. Face to face. I need to see you." There was a long silence. Finally, Mario said, "Fine. One conversation. Tonight at 9 o'clock. The penthouse at Meridian Tower. The hotel where you and Sean met for 4 months, yes. Fitting, don't you think?" The line went dead. At 9 o'clock, Jasmine stood outside the penthouse elevator, using a key card Mario had left for her at the front desk. Her hand shook as she pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator opened into a foyer more luxurious than any home she'd ever seen. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that belonged in museums. This was Mario's real life, the life he'd hidden from her completely. "Impressive, isn't it?" Mario's voice came from the living room. Jasmine walked toward the sound and found him standing by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. He was wearing dark jeans and a black sweater, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him in months. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. "5 years. Since before we met. And you never told me. I never told you a lot of things." He turned to face her. "Just like you never told me about Sean." Jasmine looked around the penthouse, at the expensive furniture, the state-of-the-art electronics, the art collection worth more than most people's homes. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think we were struggling financially?" "Because I wanted to know if you could love Mario Burt the person, not Mario Burt the bank account. And now you know." "Yes, now I know." They stood in silence, the weight of 3 years of deception hanging between them. "I did love you," Jasmine said finally. "The person, I mean, in the beginning. Did you? Or did you love the idea of rescuing someone from poverty? Did you love feeling superior to the man you were helping to succeed?" The question cut deep because it contained truth. Jasmine remembered the satisfaction she'd felt when coworkers praised her for marrying down, for choosing love over money. She'd enjoyed being seen as selfless, as someone who cared more about character than wealth. "When did it change?" Mario asked. "When Sean started paying attention to me. When he showed me what my life could be like if I was with someone who could give me the things I grew up with. The things I could have given you all along. But you didn't. You chose to lie to me, to make me think we couldn't afford nice things, to let me worry about money every month. I wanted you to love me without the money. And I wanted to be loved for who I was, not because I passed some test you designed without telling me about it." They were both shouting now, 3 years of hidden resentments finally erupting. "You cheated on me," Mario said. "You lied to me." Jasmine shot back. "I lied about having money. You lied about loving me. I did love you. You loved what you thought I was becoming. You loved the project of improving me. But when someone offered you a finished product, you jumped at the chance." Jasmine sank onto one of the leather sofas, tears streaming down her face. "What happens now? Now you learn what life is like without safety nets," Mario said coldly. "Your father's business is gone. Sean's family has disowned him. Your trust fund was tied to your father's company, so that's gone too. And you. I have everything I had before I met you, plus a very expensive education about the true nature of the woman I married." "I'm sorry," Jasmine whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mario. I made a terrible mistake. You made a choice. Multiple choices. Every day, for 4 months, you chose to betray our marriage. Every Tuesday and Friday, you chose to come to this hotel and pretend to be someone else. Every night, you came home and lied to my face about where you'd been. I can change. We can start over." Mario walked to his desk and picked up a folder. "Do you know what this is?" Jasmine shook her head. "These are bank records for an account in the Cayman Islands. Sean's been moving money there for 6 months, skimming from his father's business to prepare for your life together." Jasmine's face went white. "That's impossible. Sean wouldn't steal. Wouldn't he? He stole another man's wife. Why not another man's money?" Mario showed her the records, transfers totaling nearly $2 million, all traced back to Wolf Construction accounts. The federal investigation into the oil spill, they're going to find this money. When they do, they're going to want to know how much you knew about Sean's theft. "I didn't know anything. Can you prove that? Because you're the beneficiary of this account. Your name is on the signature cards. According to these records, you helped Sean steal money from his father's company to fund your future together." The documents were more of Mario's careful forgeries, but they were convincing enough to destroy what remained of Jasmine's life. "You're framing me," she said. "I'm showing you the consequences of your choices. You chose Sean over me. Sean chose theft over honesty. Now you both get to live with the results." Jasmine stood up, anger replacing despair. "You're destroying innocent people." "Innocent?" Mario laughed bitterly. "Your father threw his car keys at me and called me boy. You laughed at his humiliation. Sean seduced another man's wife and put his hands on her when she tried to leave. Which one of you is innocent? We made mistakes. You made choices. Every decision was deliberate. Every betrayal was calculated. Now you want forgiveness because the consequences are more severe than you expected." Mario walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. "I spent months planning this, Jasmine. Months learning about your father's business, about Sean's family, about every vulnerability I could exploit. Do you know why? Because you're a monster. Because I loved you. Because I gave you everything I had, my trust, my heart, my future, and you threw it away for a man who promised you things I already owned. He turned back to face her. The Mario you married would have forgiven you. He would have fought for your marriage, gone to counseling, tried to rebuild what you'd broken. But that Mario was an illusion. I'm the real Mario, and I don't forgive betrayal. What about mercy? What about second chances? What about loyalty? What about honoring your vows? You didn't give me a second chance when Sean showed interest. You gave up on our marriage the moment something better came along. Jasmine walked to the elevator, her heart breaking with each step. At the doors, she turned back one final time. I hope someday you'll understand that destroying us won't fix what's broken inside you, she said. And I hope someday you'll understand that some betrayals can't be forgiven, Mario replied. The elevator doors closed between them, sealing the end of their marriage and the beginning of Jasmine's new reality. Mario stood alone in his penthouse, surrounded by the wealth and power he'd hidden from the woman he'd loved. For the first time since discovering the affair, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his loss. He'd won. Gerald, Sean, and Jasmine were all facing consequences they'd never recover from. But victory felt hollow when the person you'd wanted to share it with was the one who'd forced you to fight. Outside the windows, the city stretched endlessly, full of lights and possibilities. But for Mario Burt, the view would never look the same. He'd learned that love without trust was worthless, that wealth without someone to share it with was just numbers in a bank account. He'd also learned that some lessons were worth any price, even if that price was your own happiness. The game was almost over. Only one move remained. Chapter 6, The Turning Point. 3 days after Sean's beating, the first cracks in Mario's perfect plan began to show. He was in his study reviewing financial reports when Wilson Klein burst through the door without knocking, something that had never happened in their 5-year working relationship. "We have a problem," Wilson said, his usual calm demeanor replaced by visible agitation. "Define problem." Wilson placed a tablet on Mario's desk. The screen showed a local news broadcast featuring a woman Mario didn't recognize, a blonde reporter standing outside the abandoned warehouse where Sean had been attacked. "This is Cheryl Farrell from Channel 12 News," the reporter was saying. "I'm standing outside the warehouse where Sean Vargas was brutally beaten 3 days ago. But new evidence suggests this wasn't a random attack by loan sharks. We're joined now by private investigator Art Wiggins, who has been investigating the case independently." Mario's blood went cold. Art Wiggins was good, too good. If he was involved, someone had hired him specifically to uncover the truth. "Mr. Wiggins," the reporter continued, "what can you tell us about your investigation?" Art Wiggins was a thin man with sharp eyes and the kind of weathered face that came from decades of uncovering other people's secrets. "Ms. Farrell, we've discovered that Sean Vargas's so-called gambling debts may have been fabricated. The men who allegedly attacked him, Jack Nichols, Abel Morse, and Carl Richardson, have all worked for the same employer in the past 6 months. Can you tell us who that employer is?" "A private security company called Fortress Solutions. And Fortress Solutions has only one client, a shell company called Meridian Holdings." Mario's jaw tightened. Meridian Holdings was one of his companies, but it should have been impossible to trace. The ownership structure was buried under layers of legal protection that had cost him millions to establish. "Mr. Wiggins," the reporter pressed, "are you suggesting that someone hired these men to attack Sean Vargas?" "I'm suggesting that this wasn't about gambling debts. This was about revenge." Wilson paused the video. "It gets worse." He swiped to another news segment, this one featuring Gerald McCarthy standing outside a federal courthouse. Despite his financial ruin, Gerald still commanded presence when he spoke to cameras. "I want to be very clear about something," Gerald was saying. "My family is being targeted by someone with significant resources and a personal vendetta. The oil spill that destroyed my business, the permit revocations that shut down my construction projects, the criminal charges against my partner. None of these are coincidences." "Are you suggesting a conspiracy, Mr. McCarthy?" asked the reporter. "I'm suggesting that when a man's entire life collapses in 72 hours, you look for patterns. And the pattern here points to one person, My son-in-law, Mario Burt. Mario leaned back in his chair. How did they connect me to Fortress Solutions? Art Wiggins is thorough, Wilson replied. He traced the payments through 3 different banks and 2 offshore accounts. It took him 60 hours, but he found the connection. And Gerald? Gerald's not stupid. He put together the timeline and realized the oil spill evidence appeared right after you revealed your true identity. He's hired his own investigators. Mario stood and walked to his window. Below, the city hummed with its usual activity, but he felt like he was watching it from inside a glass cage that was slowly closing around him. What's our exposure? He asked. Criminal? Probably minimal. Everything we did was technically legal, just morally questionable. Civil? That's another story. If they can prove you orchestrated the fake oil spill, Gerald could sue for damages. How much? Everything. Your entire fortune. Mario's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed a number he didn't recognize, but something told him to answer it. Mr. Burt. The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. Who is this? Guadalupe Wright, investigative reporter for the Tribune. I'm working on a story about the recent events involving the McCarthy and Wolf families. I was hoping you might comment. I have no comment. Really? Because I have some very interesting information about Fortress Solutions, Meridia Holdings, and a series of financial transactions that seem designed to target specific individuals. Mario's grip tightened on the phone. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I also think you might want to meet with me before I publish this story. It could be very damaging to a lot of innocent people, such as your employees, for instance. Fortress Solutions employs 37 people, most of them former military with families to support. When this story breaks, they'll all be unemployed and unemployable. The threat was subtle but clear. Mario could destroy Gerald, Sean, and Jasmine, but the collateral damage would extend to dozens of innocent people. Where do you want to meet? Mario asked. Cafe Luna, downtown. 1 hour. The line went. Mario turned to Wilson. Give me everything we have on Guadalupe, right? Background, employment history, financial records, family members, everything. Already working on it, Wilson replied, typing rapidly on his laptop. Former investigative reporter for the Washington Post. Won a Pulitzer for exposing government corruption. Moved to local news 3 years ago after her editor was murdered while investigating organized crime connections to city officials. Murder? Car bomb. Very professional job. Wright blamed herself for getting him involved. Took a job here to get away from the pressure. Mario nodded. So she's not easily intimidated. And she's very good at what she does. If she's investigating us, she's already found more than we want her to find. 40 minutes later, Mario sat across from Guadalupe, right in a corner booth at Cafe Luna. She was younger than he'd expected, probably mid-30s, with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of focused intensity that came from years of digging up buried truths. Thank you for meeting with me, she said, opening a thick folder. Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want? I want to understand why a successful businessman would go to such elaborate lengths to destroy 3 people. I have no idea what you're talking about. Guadalupe smiled and pulled out a photograph. It showed Mario entering the abandoned warehouse 2 hours before Sean was found beaten. Security camera from the building across the street, she explained. Amazing what technology can capture these days. Mario studied the photo. That proves I was in the area. It doesn't prove I was involved in any assault. No, but this does. She showed him another photo. Jack Nichols leaving the same warehouse 30 minutes after Mario had entered. Still circumstantial. True. But when you combine it with financial records showing payments from Meridian Holdings to Fortress Solutions and testimony from 3 witnesses who saw you meeting with Jack Nichols last week, the picture becomes clearer. Mario leaned forward. What witnesses? Employees at your restaurant. Seems you forgot about the security cameras in your own establishment. The mistake was elementary, and Mario cursed himself for not thinking of it. He'd been so focused on monitoring his targets that he'd forgotten to protect himself. What do you want? He asked. I want the story. Why did you do it? What drove a successful man to commit elaborate acts of revenge against his own family? It's not a story you'd understand. Try me. Mario looked around the cafe, at the normal people living normal lives, and realized how far he'd fallen from the man he used to be. My wife cheated on me, he said simply. Men get cheated on every day. They don't usually respond by destroying entire businesses and having people beaten. They do when they've spent their entire life learning that showing weakness gets you destroyed. Mario found himself talking, the words spilling out like water through a broken dam. He told her about the foster system, about learning to hide his emotions as a survival mechanism. He told her about building his fortune through sheer determination, about meeting Jasmine and thinking he'd finally found someone who could love him for who he was underneath the money. So you hid your wealth to test her love, Guadalupe said. I wanted to know if she could see past the surface. And when she failed the test, you decided to punish everyone involved. I decided to show them consequences. Gerald humiliated me because he thought I was poor. Sean seduced my wife because he thought I was weak. Jasmine betrayed me because she thought I couldn't give her what she wanted. All of them made the same mistake. They judged me based on what they saw, not who I was. Guadalupe was quiet for a long moment, making notes in her reporter's notebook. You realize what you become, don't you? She asked finally. Enlighten me. The very thing you accuse them of being. You've judged them based on their worst moments instead of who they really are. Gerald's an arrogant man, but he built his business from nothing just like you did. Sean made a terrible choice, but he's not a criminal. Jasmine betrayed you, but she's not a monster. They destroyed my marriage. No, Mr. Burt, you destroyed your marriage the moment you chose deception over honesty. Everything that happened after that was just consequences. The words hit Mario like physical blows. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I've seen this story before. Powerful man feels betrayed, uses his resources to destroy the people who hurt him, justifies it by calling it justice. The only difference is the scale of your revenge. What's your point? My point is that you're about to lose everything you've worked for. And for what? To prove that you're more powerful than people who already know they're weaker than you. Guadalupe pulled out another folder, this one even thicker than the first. Gerald McCarthy has filed a civil lawsuit against you for $200 million. Sean Vargas's wife has filed criminal charges for conspiracy to commit assault. The FBI is investigating the fake environmental evidence you used to destroy Wolf Construction. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to. The investigators you didn't know about have already proven it. Art Wiggins has been feeding information to federal agents for 3 days. They have recordings, photographs, financial records, and witness testimony. Mario felt the walls closing in around him. What do you want? I want you to end this. Call off your dogs, admit what you've done, and face the consequences like the man you claim to be. And if I don't, then you'll face the consequences anyway, but you'll have destroyed even more innocent people in the process. Mario stood up to leave, but Guadalupe's next words stopped him cold. Your wife tried to kill herself last night. The coffee shop seemed to spin around Mario as he sank back into his seat. She's alive, Guadalupe continued quickly. Her mother found her in time, but she left a note apologizing for ruining your life, apologizing for not being worthy of the man you really were. You're lying. I'm not. Jasmine Burt is currently in the psychiatric ward at Metropolitan Hospital on suicide watch. She blames herself for everything that's happened to her father and Sean. Mario's carefully constructed armor of righteous anger cracked completely. She cheated on me. Yes, she did. And now she's so consumed with guilt and self-hatred that she tried to end her own life. Is it the kind of justice you were looking for? I never wanted her to. Mario's voice trailed off. To what? To suffer? To feel pain? To understand what it's like to lose everything you care about? Because that's exactly what she's experiencing. Mario buried his face in his hands. I just wanted them to understand what they'd done to me. They understand. Gerald has lost his business and his reputation. Sean is facing criminal charges and may never walk normally again. Jasmine is in a psychiatric hospital wishing she was dead. How much understanding do you need? I don't know how to stop it. Yes, you do. You started this with a plan. You can end it with a plan. The question is whether you're brave enough to admit you were wrong. Mario looked up at Guadalupe Wright, this stranger who had somehow become his confessor. What happens if I come forward? What happens if I admit everything? You face criminal charges. You lose most of your money. You probably go to prison. But you also stop the cycle of destruction before it claims any more victims. Including myself? Especially yourself. The man I'm talking to right now isn't the same man who built a fortune from nothing. That man was driven by hope and determination. You're driven by hatred and revenge. Which one do you want to be? Mario closed his eyes and saw Jasmine as she'd been on their wedding day. Radiant, hopeful, full of love for the man she thought she was marrying. She'd been wrong about who he was, but maybe he'd been wrong about who she was too. I need time to think, he said. You don't have time. The federal agents are planning to arrest you tomorrow morning. Your only choice is whether you surrender voluntarily or wait for them to come get you. Mario stood up and walked toward the exit. At the door, he turned back to Guadalupe. Why do you care what happens to me? Because I've seen what revenge does to people. It destroys the person seeking it even more than it destroys the targets. I don't want to write another story about a man who had everything and lost it all because he couldn't forgive. Maybe some things can't be forgiven. Maybe. But maybe the person who needs forgiveness most is you. Mario walked out into the evening air, his mind spinning with possibilities and consequences. For the first time in months, he wasn't sure what his next move should be. Behind him, Guadalupe Wright watched through the cafe window as Mario Burt faced the most important decision of his life. The game was about to end, but who would win remained to be seen. Chapter 7. Mario's Revenge Unfolds. Mario sat in his penthouse study at 3 in the morning, surrounded by monitors displaying security feeds from across the city. Federal agents were already positioning themselves around the building. He could see them in the parking garage, in the lobby, on the street corners. They thought they were being subtle. His phone buzzed with a text from Wilson. Charges being filed in 6 hours. Last chance to disappear. Mario stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Running wasn't an option. He'd built his entire life on the principle that actions had consequences, and now it was time to face his own. But first, he had one final move to make. He opened his secure laptop and began typing commands that would activate the last phase of his plan, a phase he'd hoped never to use, but had prepared nonetheless. If he was going down, he wouldn't go down alone. The first command transferred $50 million from Gerald McCarthy's frozen assets back to the accounts they'd been taken from. The federal investigation had seized Gerald's money based on Mario's fabricated evidence, but the seizure had been legal. Now Mario was returning what had been stolen through legitimate legal channels. The second command released a comprehensive dossier to every major news outlet in the country. The files contained detailed evidence of actual corruption within the Wolf Construction Company. Not the fabricated environmental crimes Mario had created, but real safety violations that Brian Wolf had covered up for years. Mario hadn't needed to create evidence against Wolf Construction. The real evidence had been there all along, hidden in employee complaints and safety reports that had been buried by company lawyers. Mario had simply chosen to use fake evidence because it was faster and more dramatic. Now, the real evidence would surface, ensuring that Brian Wolf faced genuine consequences for legitimate crimes. The third command was more personal. It activated a trust fund that would provide for Sean Vargas's medical expenses and rehabilitation costs. The money came with conditions. Sean would have to complete therapy for his gambling addiction and abusive behavior, and he could never contact Jasmine again. But it would ensure that he recovered physically from the beating Mario had orchestrated. The fourth and most important command initiated a complete financial transfer. Every shell company, every hidden asset, every penny of Mario's fortune would be consolidated into a single trust fund with Jasmine as the sole beneficiary. The transfer was irrevocable and would take effect the moment Mario was arrested. He wasn't doing this out of love or forgiveness. He was doing it because Guadalupe Wright had been right about one thing. Jasmine's attempted suicide was more consequence than he'd intended to create. Mario's computer chimed as the final transfer completed. In 6 hours, when the federal agents arrived, they would find a man worth exactly nothing except for the clothes on his back and the criminal charges against him. But before that happened, He had one last conversation to conduct. The Metropolitan Hospital psychiatric ward was heavily secured, but Mario had been visiting patients in various hospitals for years through his charitable foundation. Getting inside required only a phone call to the night administrator. "Mr. Burt," said Dr. Angelina Valdez, the attending psychiatrist. "I have to say, I'm surprised to see you here. How is she?" "Stable. The suicide attempt was serious. She would have died if her mother hadn't found her. But she's responding well to treatment." "Can I see her?" Dr. Valdez hesitated. "That depends. Are you here as her husband or as the man who's been systematically destroying her life for the past week?" "Both, I suppose. She's very fragile right now. If you're here to cause more damage, I'm here to end it." Dr. Valdez studied Mario's face for a long moment, then nodded. "Room 314. 10 minutes only." Jasmine looked smaller than Mario remembered, sitting by the window in a hospital gown with her hair pulled back and no makeup. She turned when he entered, and her expression cycled through shock, fear, and something that might have been hope. "Mario, why are you here?" "I came to tell you something important." He sat in the chair across from her bed. "In about 5 hours, federal agents are going to arrest me for conspiracy, fraud, and a dozen other charges. I'll probably spend the next 10 years in prison. I don't understand. I fabricated evidence to destroy your father's business. I hired men to beat Sean. I created fake debt records and false witness testimony. I committed multiple federal crimes, and now I'm going to face the consequences." Jasmine stared at him in silence. "But before I go to prison," Mario continued, "I wanted you to know that you're going to be financially secure. Everything I own, every company, every property, every investment is being transferred to a trust fund in your name. I don't want your money. It's not about what you want. It's about what you need. You'll have enough to take care of your mother, to help your father rebuild his life, to pay for Sean's medical expenses if you choose to." "Why would you do this?" Mario looked out the window at the sunrise beginning to paint the sky. "Because I realized something last night. The man you fell in love with 3 years ago, the one who told you stories about growing up in foster care and working construction jobs, he was real. He was just richer than you knew. Mario, the man you cheated on, the one who hid his wealth and tested your love, he was an imposter. I created him because I was afraid you couldn't love the real me. The real you. A man who grew up believing that everyone would eventually abandon him. A man so terrified of being hurt that he hurt everyone else first. A man who spent months planning elaborate revenge because he couldn't face the simple truth that his marriage failed because he never trusted his wife enough to be honest with her." Jasmine wiped tears from her eyes. "I did love you. The person, not the money. I fell in love with your stories, your dreams, your determination. I fell in love with the man who came from nothing and built something meaningful. But you fell out of love when things got difficult. I fell out of love when I started feeling like I wasn't enough for you. Like you were settling for me because you thought you couldn't do better. That's not true, isn't it? You never told me about your real life, your real friends, your real interests. You played a role for 3 years, and I was just a prop in your performance." Mario realized she was right. He'd been so focused on testing her love that he'd never given her the chance to love the real him. "I made a lot of mistakes," he admitted. "We both did. The difference is that my mistakes destroyed people's lives, and my mistakes destroyed our marriage." They sat in silence, watching the sun rise over the city they'd both called home for 3 years without ever really knowing each other. "What happens now?" Jasmine asked. "Now I go to prison and you get to start over. With money this time, but without the baggage of being married to a man who doesn't know how to trust anyone. I don't want to start over. I want to figure out how to fix what we broke." Mario smiled sadly. "Some things can't be fixed, Jasmine. Some mistakes have permanent consequences. Are you asking for forgiveness?" "I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you that I understand now why you did what you did. I understand that living with someone who hides who they really are is its own kind of prison. And I understand that betraying someone who trusted you with their heart is its own kind of murder." Mario stood up to leave. "Take care of yourself. Take care of your mother. And if you want to help Sean recover, the money will be there." "Mario, wait." He paused at the door. "In 10 years, when you get out of prison, Would you? Would you want to have coffee sometime? Just to see who we've become. Mario looked back at the woman he'd loved and betrayed and destroyed and saved, all in the span of a single week. Ask me in 10 years, he said. Maybe by then I'll know how to answer that question. As Mario walked through the hospital corridors toward the exit, his phone buzzed with updates from the automated systems he'd set in motion. Gerald's assets were being unfrozen. Sean's medical trust was being established. Jasmine's inheritance was being finalized. By the time the federal agents arrived at his penthouse, Mario would have nothing left except the truth about what he'd done and why he'd done it. Outside the hospital, the sun was fully up and the city was coming to life. Mario drove through the streets he'd conquered and was about to lose, thinking about the choices that had brought him to this moment. He'd started this week as a man with everything, wealth, power, and a wife he thought loved him. He was ending it as a man with nothing except the knowledge that some victories cost more than they're worth. His phone rang one last time. Wilson's name appeared on the screen. "They're moving in," Wilson reported. 5 minutes out. "Good," Mario said. "It's time. Any regrets?" Mario thought about Jasmine in her hospital bed, about Gerald learning to live without his empire, about Sean facing recovery and redemption. "Ask me in 10 years, he said, and hung up the phone. The final phase of Mario Burt's revenge was complete. He destroyed his enemies and himself with equal efficiency. Now came the hardest part, learning to live with the consequences. Chapter 8, Final Confrontations. The federal courthouse was a fortress of granite and glass that had witnessed the downfall of corrupt politicians, organized crime bosses, and white-collar criminals for over 50 years. On a gray October morning, it would add Mario Burt to that list. The media circus outside was spectacular. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions at anyone entering the building, and protesters held signs calling for justice. The story of the wealthy businessman who had orchestrated elaborate revenge against his cheating wife and her family had captured national attention. Inside the courthouse, Mario sat at the defendant's table wearing an orange jumpsuit that marked him as a man who had fallen from the highest heights to the lowest depths. His lawyer, a public defender named Mike Herring, shuffled through papers with the resigned expression of a man who knew his client was guilty of everything the government accused him of. "Last chance to consider a plea deal," Mike whispered. "The prosecutor is willing to accept 15 years if you allocate to all charges." "No," Mario said quietly. "I want a trial." "Mario, you confessed to everything. You provided the evidence against yourself. There's no defense here. There doesn't need to be a defense. I just want the whole story told." In the gallery behind him, Mario could see the faces of everyone his actions had affected. Gerald McCarthy sat in the front row, looking older but somehow more solid than he had before losing his fortune. Lynn Wade McCarthy sat beside him, holding the hand of her daughter. Jasmine was there, released from the hospital but still pale and fragile. She wore a simple black dress and kept her eyes fixed on her hands, as if looking at Mario would cause physical pain. Sean Vargas sat in a wheelchair near the back, his legs still in casts but his eyes clear and focused. Beside him sat Terry Osborne, now Terry Sears again, having reclaimed her maiden name after the divorce was finalized. The prosecution's case was devastating in its thoroughness. Federal prosecutor Brandon Bullock methodically laid out every element of Mario's conspiracy, from the fabricated environmental evidence to the orchestrated assault on Sean Vargas. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Bullock said in his opening statement, "this case is about a man who possessed immense wealth and power, and who used both to systematically destroy the lives of people who had wronged him. The defendant didn't just seek justice, he sought vengeance, and he didn't care who got hurt in the process." Bullock presented the financial records showing payments to Fortress Solutions, the forged documents used to frame Gerald McCarthy's business, and the fabricated loan agreements that had led to Sean's beating. He called witnesses who testified about Mario's meetings with Jack Nichols and his associates. The most damaging testimony came from Art Wiggins, the private investigator who had unraveled Mario's conspiracy. "The defendant's plan was comprehensive and ruthless," Wiggins testified. He spent months studying his targets, identifying their vulnerabilities, and creating elaborate scenarios designed to cause maximum damage to their lives and reputations. In your professional opinion, Bullock asked, was this the work of someone seeking justice or someone seeking revenge? Revenge, Wiggins answered without hesitation. Justice involves the legal system and proportional consequences. This was personal destruction carried out with criminal methods. When it came time for the defense, Mike Herring called only one witness, Mario himself. Mr. Burt, Herring began, you've confessed to conspiracy, fraud, and multiple other federal crimes. Why are you here today instead of accepting a plea agreement? Because I want people to understand what happened and why it happened. Tell the jury about your childhood. Mario described growing up in the foster system, the abandonment and abuse he'd endured, and the lessons he'd learned about survival and trust. He talked about building his fortune through determination and sacrifice, and about meeting Jasmine at a time when he thought he'd finally found someone who could love him for who he was. Why did you hide your wealth from your wife? Because I wanted to know if she could love Mario the person instead of Mario the bank account. I'd seen too many relationships where money was the real attraction. And when you discovered the affair, I felt like everything I'd feared about relationships had come true. That people would always choose someone better when they had the option. So you decided to get revenge. I decided to show them what consequences looked like. Gerald humiliated me because he thought I was poor. Sean seduced my wife because he thought I was weak. Jasmine betrayed me because she thought I couldn't give her what she wanted. I wanted them to understand that they'd misjudged me. Do you regret what you did? Mario looked out at the gallery, meeting the eyes of each person his actions had affected. I regret that innocent people were hurt. I regret that my employees at Fortress Solutions lost their jobs. I regret that Jasmine was so consumed with guilt that she tried to take her own life. But do you regret seeking revenge against the people who wronged you? No, Mario said simply. I regret that I felt it was necessary. The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal and efficient. Mr. Burt, you've testified that you wanted people to understand consequences. Let's talk about those consequences. Gerald McCarthy lost his business and nearly lost his life savings. Was that a proportional response to him treating you disrespectfully at a restaurant? No. Sean Vargas suffered serious injuries that will affect him for the rest of his life. Was that a proportional response to him having an affair with your wife? No. Your wife attempted suicide because of the guilt and shame you caused her to feel. Was that a proportional response to her infidelity? No. Then why did you do it? Mario was quiet for a long moment. Because I could. Because I had the power to destroy them. And I convinced myself that they deserved it. And now, do you still believe they deserved what you did to them? I believe they deserve consequences for their actions. I don't believe they deserved the specific consequences I chose to impose. What's the difference? The difference is that consequences should teach lessons and promote justice. What I did was punishment designed to satisfy my own anger. So you're admitting that your actions were motivated by revenge rather than justice? Yes. And you're admitting that you used your wealth and power to harm people who were weaker than you? Yes. No further questions. During closing arguments, the prosecutor painted Mario as a dangerous man whose wealth had allowed him to act as judge, jury, and executioner in his own personal vendetta. The defendant wants you to feel sorry for him because he had a difficult childhood and because his wife cheated on him. But millions of people have difficult childhoods and betrayals in their marriages. They don't respond by orchestrating elaborate criminal conspiracies to destroy the people who hurt them. The defense's closing argument was simple and direct. Mario Burt did terrible things for understandable reasons. He's not asking for your sympathy or your forgiveness. He's asking for your understanding. He's a man who built something meaningful from nothing, who opened his heart to someone he thought he could trust, and who discovered that trust was misplaced. His response was wrong, but his pain was real. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Judge Nathaniel Aguilar scheduled sentencing for the following week, but he addressed Mario directly before dismissing the court. Mr. Burt, I've seen a lot of criminal defendants in my courtroom over the years. Most of them try to justify their actions or minimize their responsibility. You've done neither of those things. You've accepted full responsibility for your crimes and shown genuine remorse for the harm you caused. However, acceptance of responsibility doesn't erase the gravity of what you did. You used your considerable resources to systematically destroy multiple lives because your feelings were hurt. That kind of abuse of power cannot be tolerated in a civilized society. The judge paused, looking directly at Mario. I hope that when you get out of prison, you'll use your intelligence and determination for something more constructive than revenge. As the bailiffs led Mario away in handcuffs, he looked back one final time at the gallery. Gerald McCarthy was watching him with an expression that might have been respect. Sean Vargas was talking quietly to his physical therapist about his recovery timeline. Jasmine met his eyes across the courtroom and mouthed two words, "Thank you." Mario wasn't sure what she was thanking him for. The money he'd left her, the confession that had ended their mutual torment, or the lessons they'd both learned about the price of deception and betrayal. Maybe it didn't matter. Some conversations were too complex for words anyway. As the courtroom doors closed behind him, Mario Burt began the next phase of his life, learning to live with the consequences of choices that had seemed so clear when he was planning them, and so complicated now that they were irreversible. The man who had once controlled everything was about to discover what it meant to control nothing except his own response to the circumstances he'd created. It would be the hardest lesson of his life. Chapter 9, Brutal Conclusion. 22 months later, Mario sat in the visiting room of Federal Correctional Institution Oakdale, a medium-security prison in Louisiana where white-collar criminals serve their sentences alongside drug dealers and bank robbers. He'd been expecting this visit for weeks, ever since Jasmine had written to tell him she was coming. She looked different, stronger, more confident, wearing clothes that suggested financial stability but not ostentation. Her hair was shorter, and there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there during their marriage, self-knowledge. "You look good," Mario said as she sat across from him at the metal table. "Prison suits you," she replied, studying his face. "You look more like the man I thought I married." Funny how losing everything can clarify your perspective. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment, two people who had once shared a bed and a life now separated by more than just the table between them. "How's your father?" Mario asked. "Dead," Jasmine said simply. Mario's face went white. "What?" "Heart attack 6 months ago." The stress of losing everything, the shame of the scandal, the guilt about how he treated you, it all caught up with him. "I'm sorry," Mario said, and meant it. "Are you? Because this is what you wanted, isn't it? All of us destroyed, all of us paying for what we did to you." "No, I never wanted Gerald to die. But you're not surprised that he did." Mario looked down at his hands, which had once signed checks worth millions and now belonged to a man whose entire world consisted of a 6-by-8-foot cell. "How's your mother?" "Managing. The money you left me has been enough to take care of her, to pay for Dad's funeral, to help Sean with his medical bills." "You're helping Sean?" "I'm helping Sean because that's what decent people do when someone is suffering, even if that someone hurt them." The judgment in her voice was clear, and Mario felt it like a physical blow. "Tell me about Sean," he said. "He'll never walk normally again. The beating you arranged damaged his spine. He uses a cane now, and he'll need surgery for the rest of his life." "And his family?" "His father died in federal prison 8 months ago. Suicide. Brian Wolf couldn't handle the shame of the environmental charges and the financial ruin. Another death. Another consequence Mario hadn't intended, but should have anticipated. Sean's mother moved to Florida to live with her sister," Jasmine continued. "His sister, Kelly, lost her house when the family business collapsed. Her children had to change schools, lost their friends, started over in a different state. You're here to make me feel guilty. I'm here to make you understand what your revenge really cost." Jasmine pulled out a folder and placed it on the table between them. "These are the consequences you didn't plan for," she said. 37 employees of Fortress Solutions who lost their jobs when your company was shut down. 14 families who lost their homes. 6 children who couldn't go to college because their parents' savings were wiped out. She opened the folder to reveal photographs and documents. This is Martinez Rodriguez. He worked security for you for 3 years. When Fortress Solutions collapsed, he couldn't find another job because of the criminal investigation. His wife left him, took their 2 children. He's been homeless for 8 months. Mario stared at the photograph of a man he remembered as dedicated and professional. This is Elvira Davison. She was an accountant for one of your shell companies. When the FBI investigation revealed that the company was a front, she was blacklisted from the accounting profession. She's working as a cashier at a grocery store now, making 1/10 of what she used to earn. More photographs, more stories of lives destroyed by the collateral damage of Mario's revenge. And this, Jasmine said, pulling out a final photograph, is what your revenge did to me. The photograph showed Jasmine in the hospital after a suicide attempt, pale, hollow-eyed, connected to machines that had kept her alive when she'd wanted to die. You didn't just punish the people who wronged you, she said. You punished everyone connected to them. You punished their families, their employees, their children. You became the thing you accused us of being, someone who destroyed innocent people to satisfy your own desires. I know, Mario said quietly. Do you? Because I don't think you really understand what you've done. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice intense but controlled. My father died, believing he was a failure who had destroyed his family's legacy. Sean's father died, believing he was a criminal who had betrayed everyone who trusted him. Those men died carrying guilt for crimes they didn't commit, shame for mistakes that were manufactured by your elaborate revenge plot. They made real mistakes too. Yes, they did. My father was arrogant and cruel to you. Sean was selfish and destructive. But their real mistakes were human failings, not the monstrous crimes you convinced them they'd committed. And you? Mario asked, what were your real mistakes? I fell in love with the idea of being noble instead of falling in love with you. I married someone I thought I was saving instead of someone I thought was my equal. And when someone else offered me a different kind of love, I chose betrayal instead of honesty. Jasmine's voice softened slightly. But you know what my biggest mistake was? I spent 3 years living with someone who never trusted me enough to show me who he really was. I was married to a stranger who was testing me without telling me there was a test. So we're both responsible for destroying our marriage. We are. But only one of us responded by destroying innocent people. Mario was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the weight of what Jasmine was telling him. Why are you here? He asked finally. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that your revenge is still happening. Every day, people are suffering consequences from choices you made in anger. Children are going hungry because their parents lost jobs at companies you destroyed. Families are broken because you decided that everyone connected to your enemies deserved to be punished. What do you want me to do about it? I want you to stop it. I'm in prison. I can't stop anything. You can. You have almost 6 years left on your sentence. When you get out, you'll still be young enough to rebuild your fortune. The question is what you'll do with it. Jasmine pulled out another document, a proposal for a foundation that would provide assistance to the families affected by Mario's conspiracy. I've drawn up plans for a charitable foundation, she said. It would provide job training for displaced workers, college scholarships for children whose families lost their savings, counseling services for people dealing with the trauma of financial ruin. You want me to fund this with money I don't have. I want you to commit to funding it with money you'll earn after you're released. I want you to spend the rest of your life trying to repair the damage you caused instead of being proud of how effectively you destroyed your enemies. Mario studied the proposal, reading through detailed plans for assistance programs and rehabilitation services. And if I refuse, then you continue being the monster you became. You serve your sentence, get released, rebuild your fortune, and go back to being a man who values power over people. Is that what you think I am? A monster? I think you're a man who had the capacity for great good or great evil, and who chose evil when he was hurt. The question is whether that choice was permanent or whether you're capable of choosing differently. What about forgiveness? Mario asked. What about mercy for someone who made terrible mistakes? Forgiveness isn't something you ask for, Jasmine replied. It's something you earn through your actions. Mercy isn't something you deserve because you've suffered consequences. It's something you demonstrate by how you treat other people. She stood up to leave, gathering her papers. I'm not asking you to forgive yourself, Mario. I'm asking you to stop making other people pay for your pain. And if I do this, if I commit to your foundation, if I spend the rest of my life trying to make amends, what then? Do we have that coffee you mentioned in the hospital? Jasmine looked down at the man she'd once loved, the man who had loved her and destroyed her and saved her in the span of a single week. Ask me in 6 years, she said, after you show me who you really choose to be. As she walked toward the exit, Mario called after her. Jasmine, she turned back. I'm sorry. For all of it. For the lies, for the revenge, for the pain I caused you and everyone else. I know you are, she said. The question is whether you're sorry enough to spend the rest of your life proving it. The visiting room door closed behind her, leaving Mario alone with the weight of consequences he was still learning to understand. That night, in his cell, Mario read through Jasmine's foundation proposal again. The estimated cost was staggering, nearly $100 million over 20 years. It would require him to rebuild his fortune with the specific purpose of giving it away to the people his revenge had harmed. It would be a different kind of empire than the one he'd built before, not designed to accumulate power, but to repair damage. Not built on the principle that everyone would eventually betray him, but on the hope that some mistakes could be forgiven through sufficient effort to make amends. Mario pulled out a piece of paper and began to write. To the Board of Trustees of the Consequence Foundation, he began, naming Jasmine's proposal for the first time. I commit to funding this organization upon my release from federal prison. This letter constitutes a legally binding agreement that 25% of all income one earned for the remainder of my life will be donated to assist the families affected by my criminal conspiracy. He signed the document and sealed it in an envelope addressed to Jasmine. It wasn't redemption. Redemption couldn't be purchased with money or promise.